started. Excellent. Welcome. Thank you. So we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Oki and welcome. Thank you. So I'd like to start with the approval of the agenda. Craig.
I'd like to add under, let me just see where it is, policies, action item 8.2 to include policy 207.1. And then I would move the agenda as amended.
Okay. Are there any other items to add? I will just let everybody know that we do have a presentation at some point later in the day, so I won't be adding it to the agenda, but it will be a piece that we will have later today as well. Okay, so looking for those in favor of approval of the agenda, and that's carried. Next is approval. So we do have two sets of minutes. So we'll do the first one, which is the December 20th one. And those were both emailed out. There was a slight error in what was included in the package, but those have now been updated and a copy has been provided to all of the trustees. So as well as it's online, the corrected one. So I'm just looking for if there's any errors or omissions. Christine.
Just a correction. I bring the report to the facilities committee, not Tyler Demers. So if that could be changed, that would be great.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I bring the report of the facilities committee, not Tyler.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Any others? Seeing none, if I can get a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Craig, and those in favor? And that's carried. And next we have the minutes for the special meeting on January 10th. So I know that the special meeting came up and we needed to call that. And I just want to make sure that I clarify for people that sometimes say, why are we having a special meeting? So in order for us to do due process, when we have a matter that needs to be discussed at a regular official meeting, we do need to call a special board meeting. It's not that there's anything big that needs to be dealt with. It's just something that needs to be dealt with at an actual called on meeting. So that's why we called the special meeting, just so that we could follow policy, and it's not anything that should be concerning to anybody. So the minutes for that are available. I do have a correction to be made, and I gotta flip to it. So it was to move out of camera. It says the chair reconvened the meeting. It was actually Tyler that had us move out of camera at 3:49. So certainly a minor change, but just would like that to accurately reflect. And could I have somebody approve the minutes for the December 10th or the January 10th meeting as amended? Craig?
What does reconvene the meeting mean?
It should be that move out of camera.
Okay, moved out of camera.
Yeah. So Tyler moved us out of camera at 3:49.
Okay. I so move the minutes.
As amended. Okay, thank you. And those in favor? Jenny? Okay, and that's carried. Go ahead, Christine.
Sorry, I voted to approve the agenda and then I had a note that I wanted to, just for clarification, am I allowed to go back regarding what's in the agenda?
We've approved it, but we can certainly.
Sorry, just to make a note of it.
Yep.
The way two memorandums are worded, we have 3 board chairs. So in the Division School Council, Jenny Steed is named board chair, and in Policy Advisory Committee, Craig Whitehead is named as board chair. So if those could just be noted as committee chairs. It was just an observation.
Okay. That's okay. Yep. Okay, so moving on, we're on to our associate superintendent reports. So the first is business and operations. So Cheryl is going to do that for us. Christine is not well and not able to join us today, but Cheryl will provide us with that update.
Great. And so Christine Lee has provided me with a briefing of the areas of her responsibility. And so it's an oral report today. Facilities, we're waiting the awarding of the contract for the design build of the new K-5 in Gary Station. Due to complications in the tender process, the contract award will likely not be until mid to late February. Unfortunately, we're hoping that we'd get in the dirt a little earlier, but we'll see how once that goes out, how expedient it can be. Finance, it's budget season. Happy face, exclamation mark. Of course, this is the passion of finance department. Work will begin by the finance department to prepare budget assumptions. The board budget committee will meet the week of February 20th to review the budget development schedule and preview a new budget engagement tool that Avis and Garrett have been developing. The provincial legislature will sit beginning February 28th until March 30th. We anticipate the provincial budget will be tabled in March. Technology, they've been busy supporting schools with diploma examinations, including the uploading of information to PASI. And due to the success of the division's esports and VR programs, the department has been asking to participate in a variety of seminars and showcases. They're getting quite renowned across the province and Canada in terms of the amazing work that they've done in those. So they're getting a lot of requests to show off these programs and support other divisions in developing similar programs. Transportation, we've had camera systems being installed on the school buses. These systems are used by many school divisions to support driver training, route monitoring, and student safety. They have 4 views and audio, so they're quite sophisticated and will certainly help us out in all of those areas. The collection, retention, access, and use of data is in compliance with FOIP legislation. Notice has been provided to families and all of those things that need to be happen. The cost of the cameras are cost shared with Holy Spirit, with installation covered by Southland. And notification of the camera systems, like I said, was sent out in December by Garrett by direct message. And our cost was about $80,000, not an operating expense, capital expense amortized over a 5-year period for under transportation. And ICE Scholarship Showcase event is coming up March 9th. And so far, we've raised $15,500 of sponsorship, as well as the Lenovo laptop. So as one of our door prizes. So yeah, we're going to have some good attracted door prizes, and that's it.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you. Did you say the cameras on buses, the cost of the installation was covered by Southland, but did you say the cost of the equipment was where, sorry?
Was shared with Holy Spirit, Lethbridge School Division and Holy Spirit.
Okay, thank you.
Christina.
I also have a question about the video on the school buses. Could I just get more information about how it was requested or how it came to be? Because my understanding was that it was requested by Southland, or it was initiated. I've lost the track.
That's all right. So a number of combined things. So driver training, first of all, for sure for Southland, that's their they gain in this in terms of more efficiency with training, and so they again paid for the installation, as well as monitoring of making sure the students are safe while they're on the bus, and what the students are doing on the bus, and certainly that's readily available by camera. Should there be any incidents on the bus, and it's and route monitoring as well.
No other. Oh, go ahead, Christina. Yep.
I just wanted to share that I did. I have heard some feedback, and I do share a bit of like hesitancy around the video cameras. I think sometimes we have, not we as in the division, but we as in a society have a trend toward over surveillance of young people, and it's something that there is growing concern about. So I do just want to share that frustration. But just a trend that I have heard and just want to represent into the conversation. Certainly, I know there's also the route piece, which there's been lots of feedback about. So I appreciate that both the divisions and Southland are really focusing on making sure that students are getting everywhere safely. And I recognize that video cameras are part of a response to safety and can certainly deter certain levels of violence. That's the hope anyway. But I just want to make sure that that piece about hesitancy of over surveillance of young people is in the conversation. Thank you.
And Christina's been very vigilant in making sure that FOIP is followed closely, right? That accessibility isn't open. Certainly, in part, it's also, part of being proactive in terms of driver distraction due to activities on the bus, right? And so there's been, different incidences that it would have been helpful to have been able to sort of figure out what was happening on the bus during a particular incident. And drivers have been reporting increased instances of being distracted due to behavior.
Craig.
Yeah, I think it goes along with our risk management, and it's our due diligence, because if something happens on a bus and the bus driver's distracted, there's an accident, we could still be liable. And it also takes out who did what. So I think it's important. I appreciate your comment about whatever word you use, monitoring, but I think it's important that we look at the risk management and the due diligence, and hopefully this will cut down on the activities that are going on in the bus.
Thank you. No further, Andrea? Go.
I just wondered, is there an amount of time that the video is kept, or is it kept forever, the surveillance video?
I don't have the specific answer. I know that they're being very vigilant in enforcing FOIP, and so FOIP would have a period of time. Yeah, it wouldn't be forever. I'm sure that it's destroyed and refreshed at the appropriate intervals.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, we'll turn it over for Morag for instructional services.
And very quick turnaround from December to now, given that it was last week I submitted my report. So not a lot on the radar in the report itself. Mind you, lots of work going on, as you can see by the dates that have been shared coming up for the next 3 months. Some attention just want to bring to the board's awareness around the solstice flag raising. So that is March 21st. I think if you want it, there we go. Blackfoot flag raising ceremony. We'll be working with Joel Health others on that piece. So really excited about that opportunity, and would really encourage, and there will be more information coming as we get closer, but just want to make sure that that's on the board's radar and that you leave that space available to come in for probably an hour, 2 hour piece of time. We did interviews all last week. So we were in hot search of a digital wellness teacher and a digital wellness FSLC. And we're just kind of working through that process this week, getting references and just making sure we keep HR in the loop with that. Great pool of candidates. So we're excited to have hopefully the team up and ready by February 1st. Student forum wellness, we just spent some time over at the Multicultural Center this morning looking at the space and making sure we were organized for the event, and it looks like a great space and a good place to host 60 plus kids and 20 plus staff members, and yeah, it's coming along great. And if you want to just scroll down a little bit more there, Kristen, if you don't mind. We just continue our think tank process. So Jackie and I meeting both with our administrators, and then we also have an interministerial table. Just great conversations that are happening. And I think some good partnerships that are evolving as well, right? Whenever you have people with common interests coming to the table in that management role, there's some creative thinking that's happening, which is really exciting to see. And we'll see where that conversation takes us in March. We could just scroll down once more. I think I have 4 bullets. and then just Jordan's principal. Really just want to say a special thank you to Rachel Huff. She is our local representative at the First Nations Health Consortium. She has really done a great job of bringing about the profile of Jordan's principal in the South. It really was an underutilized resource, and she has worked very closely hand in hand with our staff and families to really get services and resources out to families, whether that's around support and health accessibility or accessibility in education, from transportation to, family resources related to special needs, to educational assistance support, to supporting FSCD supports with counseling. So just really want to send a big shout out to Rachel Huff. She's really done great in helping our families. So we continue to be really happily surprised by the resources that Jordan's principal has supported with us this year, especially. So a special thank you there.
Craig.
Thank you for the report. One of the things on my last trip to the States is that some states are considering having some sort of ban on social media for middle school, high school kids. I would like to get, and I don't know if we should do this in I'm not in camera, but a committee of the whole, is to get more information on, they're saying that because of social media, anxiety, depression, all of those things are increasing in the youth. And as a board member, and I'm not speaking for the whole board, but I'd like to get more of a grasp of what can be done and what we as a board could do in governance, and what could be done, or what are we doing, and what more could we do to overcome that negative thing that's happening. I mean, when I grew up, it was face to face and you knew who was bothering you. Nowadays, it's pretty anonymous. So I just raised that as a point of concern, and I appreciate that you've got stuff on digital wellness, but it would be nice to bring for the board to learn more about it and what we could do.
Morag.
And you're barking up the right tree, Craig, because I think that's definitely where we're being very curious as well. And that's why we're super excited about the digital wellness teacher. I would think that they'll be doing a needs assessment, right, within the first couple of months alongside the family school liaison counselors. Well, we have some really great questions in our student forum around that piece. I think the feedback from principals at this juncture has been the concerns are not so much around what's happening online in school time, it's what's happening outside, right? That more unsupervised time. And so, just looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and getting some more information about where we're at in our system. And then as well, where families are at, because I think that's the piece we hear repeatedly. It was even one of our interview questions. How do we assist parents who are sharing with us the struggles they're having with how to appropriately supervise or put, I'm not going to say structures in place, but how to parent in a digital age, right? And I think a lot of it is not so much about the technology piece, from what I'm understanding. It's about how do we bridge and build and support communication and relationships and building family connection again after students have been really in very unsupervised areas for an extended period of time during the pandemic. So definitely a reality that I think we're facing in many different realms and wanting to support however we can. So appreciate that question, Craig.
And thank you for the answer. And we appreciate all the work that your group is doing to help these students and families.
Christine.
Thank you. My question kind of piggybacks on Craig. I had my question written for the wellness, but it ties in here, so we'll just keep it all together. This is, I think it's really fantastic, and it's focused on student engagement with online. Is there a plan, or is there an element of understanding teacher directive on the use of technology within this? I know within the classroom setting, often through conversation with students and staff, it's you're done your work, you can go on technology, and it's used as a time filler, and I personally find that concerning. So is there going to be an intentional element of staff learning and capacity building on how to direct usage of technology?
Yeah, answer is sort of twofold. In developing this role where we were looking at a teacher and an FSLC, we thought the teacher could work on more of the proactive side, working side by side with teachers, looking at lessons that they can build, co-creating through sort of the needs assessment, but also learning about the pressures at each of the schools. So we know at, say, Churchill, we're seeing very different digital pressures than what we're seeing, say, at GS Lakey. And so the goal of the teacher piece is to build foundational lessons, grade 3 to 10, understanding, they've only got 5 months to start with, so I don't anticipate they're going to be doing all the lessons right away, but we were thinking of piloting at one school with one grade and then building from there and getting into the classrooms and working with the teachers. A strong part of that digital wellness teacher role is absolutely professional learning. So how do we approach our teaching, and how can we look at shifting and integrating best practice around, digital implementation, but in the bigger piece, building social emotional capacity in our kids that we're seeing are really struggling with empathy and struggling with face-to-face communication and struggling with many, again, of the things that are not digital but endemic of our digital situation that we've worked through. So absolutely, our goal on the teacher side would be similar to that of what we see with our lead teachers, right? Side-by-side teaching, doing some residencies, building PL, as well, providing opportunities for family nights or lunch and learns for parents who are interested in learning more about what they can do to support their kids who might be struggling with technology use. So definitely recognize that perspective in where we want to go and how we want to be supporting our kids moving forward so they build healthy social emotional wellness, right? Yeah. And that is the other piece. This is building the plane as we're flying. This is something that has not been done before. So I anticipate meeting with the team, both the FSLC and the teacher, weekly for an hour and a half, really scaffolding and developing those responsibilities. I've got a template right now that I have developed that I'll share with the board after to have a look at the general capacities of both so you get an idea of what it's going to look like. But I think we have a good foundation there. And the knowledge of really grade 3 through 10, those developmental stages are all quite unique. So the early kiddos, the middle school and the high school. And so the teacher is going to have to understand both health curriculum currently and how it's changing with the curricular pressures to, the issues that are currently presenting that principals are spending a lot of disciplinary time on, to that parent education piece and supervision and how we can educate kids. I'll keep talking about this for the next hour if you like. But I am super passionate and jazzed about it. I think it's going to be, it's an exciting time because I think this has been something that's been asked for a while. So, thanks. Cheryl.
So, Christine, were you asking if how we use technology in our classrooms will be part of the conversation? And so, I think that, because I think what I'm hearing is, are we always making good choices in our classrooms pedagogically in terms of use of technology? And I think that will be an outcome of this as well, and certainly part of the conversation.
Thank you, Morgan. I know your passion definitely comes through. And when you talk about building that plane as you go, I'm quite confident that we have good builders that are going to be building that, and we have amazing pilots that are going to be flying that plane. So thank you. Moving on to Mike for Human Resources.
Thank you. So just to hit a few of the highlights of the report. First of all, in terms of additions of teachers, that sort of thing, just after I submitted my report, we got word from the U of L and Alberta Ed that the certification for new teachers has come through. So that always means we get a few more folks on the sub list, which is always exciting. So we're pretty happy about that. In terms of other highlights, Ron and I had an opportunity to work with our beginning administrators, just around some hiring processes, evaluation processes, supervision process, which is something that we always enjoy, that opportunity to help build a bit of capacity in the division and just get to work with our fantastic administrators. That's always a good thing. And then on the second page, if you can just scroll down, Kristen, just wanted to give you a little bit of information about the transition to Inkblot. So Inkblot, we used to do our employee family assistance program, used to be provided. It's all done under the umbrella of ASCBP, but ASCBP used an organization called Homewood Health. Now they're using an organization called Inkblot. That transition happened at the beginning of December. So, I mean, we never love when there's a big transition like that, but it's a good opportunity to sort of refresh people's memories about what's available and encourage them to check out and use the process. I know I went in and got an account and had all kinds of problems with an old email that was associated with my account that shows you how often I was in there. So I was like, yeah, if I'm going to talk about this, I should actually log in and have an account. So step one has been achieved. But just a few things for you. I mean, I know you're aware of the counseling crisis support end of it, but if you look at the resources that they provide in terms of financial services, legal services, really significant. I've had an opportunity to talk with a few people that have used some of the life transition services as well, you know, elderly parents, that sort of thing. And that's really been appreciated by the folks who've used it. So it's something that we got to continue to spread the word on, because there's really good opportunities in there for our employees. So that's it for me, unless there's questions.
I see a few hands going up. Andrea, and then Craig.
Thanks so much for getting the word out about all of these. And I think maybe even for the next few meetings, if this came out every time, so someone going through it would go, I didn't know they had that kind of service, because, you know, in Help for Elder Care, like, who knew? I think these are fantastic. So thank you. And talking about new teachers, once their certification comes through, do they get on the sub list pretty quickly? Like, is that turnaround pretty fast?
Yeah, generally speaking, we're just waiting to push the yes button. They've applied. This is assuming that they'd have applied in advance, provided all the other things that they need to provide. And, you know, we've gone through our process. Then it's really just a matter of putting them on the list, and it takes probably 30 seconds. So as long as they've applied, and not everybody who graduates applies, some of them are working and, you know, they have a job, so they're not able to sub, and they'll apply for things that come open in the spring, that sort of thing. But we also, the career fair, the U of L career fair usually happens in December. So we push that sub list pretty hard. And once you get your certification, we'll get you on. So yeah, I'll know next board meeting how many we were able to get on. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Craig.
Can't remember what onboarding means.
It can mean a variety of things, but in the context of Lethbridge School Division, usually what we're talking about is coming in and you've got some paperwork that you need to fill out to get your benefits ready, payroll, that sort of thing, learning about how you access information for your email, for your dashboard.
Kind of in the induction part of it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, and the other thing is, I'm glad to see hiring of 17 support staff. Is this just replacing people, or is this just an increase of support staff?
Yeah, it's usually a mix of both. So we've got, in some cases, it could be replacing somebody who's on a medical leave, could be replacing somebody who's resigning, and then there still is some new staffing that goes out around this time of year as well. That's happening pretty much ongoing.
All right. And my third question is, and I know that this is happening in rural areas, that sometimes student teachers are being able to sub before they're certificated because of the lack of subs. We're not to that point yet, are we, in this division?
No, so there is a way that you can, before they have their certification, you can get somebody working for you. Essentially, you have to write a letter saying that you've employed this person, and the university then has to say, yep, they've done everything they need to do. And then Alberta Ed says, okay, they can go ahead and teach, and we'll get their certification figured out.
Right.
We do that if we are hiring somebody for a job, and we do it every year. I can't remember off the top of my head if we've done it in this last few weeks. I suspect we have. I know we have at least once or twice, but we typically won't do that for the substitute list because the reality is, unless we really are in dire straits,
Right.
and we're not at that point with a teacher sub list right now, because many of the folks who apply, they just want to get their certification as quick as possible. They're not sure where life's journey is going to bring them, whether they're going to sub, whether they're going to continue to work, whether they're going to move, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Excellent. No other questions? We're good. Thank you so much, Mike, for all the work your team does. Cheryl. Next with the superintendent report, board priorities report.
I won't read through it. It's lengthy, of course. Everyone, the leadership team in the division in Education Center contributes to it. So Morag already talked about the digital wellness initiative, where it looks like we're going to be launching that soon once Morag is finished with the hiring process. Just as a heads up, certainly our youth engagement officer program and shortage of officers, is something that our schools are experiencing. And we did meet with Morgan and I met with the chief and other officers and Holy Spirit. And so certainly, I mean, the chief today is very supportive of the program, recognizes the value of it. The reality right now is that they don't have the personnel to fill, but certainly there's the commitment to make that happen when they do. And so we received communication today to put out to our schools in terms of processes for more emergent kinds of situations, since we don't have ready access to YEOs in our schools. And it is quite an impact on our schools. I won't and also on division office, because certainly the number of VITRAs that Jen Day and Jim Kerr and Morag not even, because certainly you're skilled in that, but it's not typically one of your roles, has had to engage in since we've come back from the holidays has been some of the highest numbers we've ever seen. And so certainly not having access is impactful for sure. So just so you're aware of that, if you hear about that as trustees, that is a challenge for our schools right now. Our literacy and numeracy lead teachers have been incredibly busy. It's interesting, when we reviewed our school education plans and education results report, I don't think there was one elementary school that didn't talk about the lead teachers and what they've been doing in the schools, as well as middle schools. Right now, Karen, the director of curriculum and instruction, the two lead teachers, and myself are meeting with every school to review data from diploma exams, provincial achievement results, Founders and Pinnell, and MIPI results, and taking a look at what their plans are for those. And experiential learning really grown this year with dual credit with Lethbridge College, and certainly, and because it hasn't happened for 3 years, it has to be in there. The Southwest Regional Skills Canada competition is happening again earlier this year than usual, March 18th, which will be a challenge for some of our schools because that's just right after semester change. So it'll be a challenge to make sure that we engage students in that competition. And we've talked about innovation and technology, but all kinds of things going on. That was in Christine Lee's report. Kindergarten, it's on the go. Registration, January 23rd. Is that today? No, yesterday. Opened up yesterday. So we're on the go for kindergarten registration. And Morag talked about under Indigenous education, the Blackfoot flag raising, March 21st. So certainly a significant date to put on your calendars. Under wellness, she also talked about the student forum, the wellness and inclusion forum, and I'm sure that following that forum, Morag will have some rich information to provide to the board regarding how students are thinking, because certainly often we wonder, how is it that our youth don't think the same as their parents, or our youth don't think the same as the staff necessarily, and so what are they thinking? Because after all, they are our customers, so we really need to spend some time, as Morag and her team will be doing, having them share their perspective on how things are going. And diversity, we've got the Positive Spaces Committee, and I think the SOGI procedures are coming out. They're done, edited and formatted, so those should be out shortly. International programs, of course, those just are busy. And admin professional learning, we just had that just this last week. And we've got our inclusive education members. What's exciting, if you go under division professional learning, and this is a really important highlight because I know there's a team that have worked really hard on this. So if you go down to the fourth bullet, through the support of inclusive education human resources, our division will be accessing a new professional learning opportunity for education assistants. The program is called Parabytes, and its content is based off the work of Julie Costin and Kate McLeod, who wrote the Paraprofessionals Handbook for Effective Support in Inclusive Schools. And I know this team included Rhonda Oss, Jackie, I believe, and Rochelle. And what they're doing is they're not just throwing out this Parabytes, they're making sure it's tailored to our school division, that time is taken. It's not just thrown out to our education assistants to say, you know, this program is available. No, time will be built in. It'll be facilitated, guided, and it'll be a great learning resource, guided learning resource. And Rebecca Adamson, good guided learning opportunities for our assistants. And so they're quite excited about that. And as well, been really proactive in terms of this has been Rebecca and as well and Jackie, been really proactive in providing SIVA training. And if they can't come here, they go to them. They've been very proactive in making sure they have that our assistants have access to that professional learning. And so they've been going to the schools, even if there's been sort of a cluster of staff that they can deliver together. And under teacher induction program, now I'm going to the very end. It had in there that the last was December 13th. Actually, it was just last week, January 20th, and there was a principal panel that our new teachers had access to ask them some questions. And so that was interesting to watch. Those sort of happen on Friday afternoons. And if there's any questions.
Greg.
Well, I'd just like to add something to the domain on governance. You can see how boring my life is because I actually read ASBA's news releases. And here, lo and behold, CTV News stated that Alison Purcell, in the meeting with the city of Lethbridge, brought up the fact, and I can attest to this because I've got a ticket, my wife's got a ticket, of the confusing amount of playground and school zones. And you leave one that says leaving school zone, then all of a sudden it's a playground zone, and you've sped up and you've got a ticket. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Maybe they will listen to us, but it's worthy to note that it was on the CTV News. So I'd like to add that into our minutes.
Thanks. And yesterday I did global as well, so it is out there. So the city is doing a survey currently on playground and school zones and having a harmonized playground zone. So it's certainly, we can promote it and have our parent community fill that survey out, but it does help make our school zones a safer place, especially in the evening hours when a lot of our playgrounds and fields are busy. And if we can extend those into playground zones, then drivers are going slower when those kids are out there in the fields. So, Christina.
I always just want to go through every point and be like, wow, good job. So great. Thank you all again so much for all the work that goes into all of these. I just wanted to draw a through line of the effort towards inclusion and collaboration that I see through all of them. And I just want to appreciate every single department because it is a collective effort. I recently had the opportunity to speak with the new CBC bureau that's coming to town, and they kind of wanted to know what's the context of Lethbridge. And I was like, this place reaches for each other. We want to collaborate so much, and every effort is made all the time against almost every odd, right? Systems inherently tend to pull away, right? Just by the nature of how systems are built. And so I just want to appreciate that every single team in this division makes every effort to maintain collaboration where it exists and to seek it out where it doesn't. And so I appreciate all of the effort, even just things to see Rhonda go to the chamber and talk about working parents. I didn't even know that happened. So to even then to hear that we had an opportunity to share probably on behalf of our staff that we know, I can't even imagine to be a teacher and have your child and you need to be a parent and a teacher at the same time. And then, of course, all of the parents of the students who are in our classrooms. So, for example, so thank you for that. And specifically around the inclusion services for, folks with, deaf and hard of hearing, like just having supported many families through that process from other sides, just the length and intensity of services that can be required for access for one student can be enormous, just given how systems work. And so I appreciate that based on these types of reports, we can tell that those students aren't given up on. We continue to fight for each student to have an opportunity to learn in our classrooms. And so thank you for, I have a list is long to make all the time, but it gives me a great deal of confidence that we continue to seek out opportunities for student learning. So thank you.
Other comments? Thank you, Cheryl, for your staff putting all that together. And next is donations and support.
And that's there for the board. And I just want to say, I recognize that we likely miss some donations and support every month, right? And I know that, Kristen puts it out and seeks sort of from schools. But so I always like to say, apologies to the businesses if we did. And if you know of any that we missed, certainly we'll get it in the following month that you could let us be aware of. And so we've got the Russ Stewart of Promax or Agronomy Services donation, and as well as the Vietcon from Laura and Jack to hear, and Janice Jackson as well towards breakfast nutrition program. And should I just keep going unless there's, did I miss any that you know about?
No, I think it's great to see the breakfast programs there and that they're being supported. And I've noticed that Nicholas Sharon breakfast program seems to almost every month
they're
has
doing
that
well.
update. Yes, so that's great to hear. Okay, next.
And the Acknowledgement of Excellence Showcase, Proby took a little bit of a stylistic endeavor, and so I won't go through that. It's just a nice little anecdote, right? That an experience of one student with one teacher, and the anecdote really is to represent, is representative, symbolizes the importance of the work that they do with children. So that was a nice change to have that anecdote, and then we've got LCI and what they've done is sort of showcased some of the events they've had. They've worked really hard at re-engaging their youth and parents, and they're a very busy place. Have had a lot going on, and so certainly extend my congratulations to LCI. I know I'm really excited about the Dance Academy show coming up on the 1st. And, they've had dances again and Christmas concert and productions, Wizard of Oz, and so all kinds of things continue to be planned. And General Stewart as well, certainly. I think I've mentioned before when I first came to Lethbridge as superintendent, I didn't even know General Stewart was there. And when I remember driving around that corner, going down that road, going, wow, what a nice jewel. Close to the downtown area of Lethbridge, just one of those perfect size schools, community school, family feel, strongly supported by parents. And when you read through the report by General Stewart, you get the sense of the breadth of things that happen for kids in that school and how students are supported across a variety of areas, and the engagement of community again, and the importance of the school to the community.
Questions or comments? I do agree. Reading that story it was it was so neat to read.
Well, we sort of were torn, right, Kristen, because they're supposed to keep their, some are rule followers and some not supposed to keep their reports a certain length. And how do you say
no to that?
How do you say no to a story, right? So it was a nice change. It was a delightful read, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then to see General Stewart with them, just that engagement of having the kids do the announcements on the Fridays, and to hear about the gratitude being done in Blackfoot, like that is.
Yeah, they've really embraced, and I know that Mel Morrow has really done a lot of work with across all of our elementary schools to really embed some
Yeah.
perspectives and thinking.
I think Andrea wants to say something.
And I have fond memories of doing the lip dubs. So if you get a chance, go on YouTube and watch those. Those were just so fun, to take that event that usually happens with older children and have children everywhere and have that camera seamlessly move through and then run your children to where they need to be next. So there's a lot of learning and memory that goes into that. It was fun to read about that.
It is a good watch. Yeah, so you can go on there and link to it and watch it.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Town Hall.
Town Hall, really, we've been through the agenda and how the process will work. Just want to emphasize, and I know Garrett's will really push it hard, that it's at Victoria Park, not LCI. We thought we'd have to use LCI small gym because we thought that Victoria Park would be undergoing their renovations in that gym area, but that's going to happen after Town Hall. So Victoria Park just is a better location, and especially with the foyer, it's larger. And so I will find someone to sort of hang out outside of LCI small gym just in case, and to redirect. But we're really pushing it out there that it's at Victoria Park. And so my question to the trustees, so that we can get organized, and I don't necessarily for some of these structures, you'd have to be the same, but you don't necessarily have to be the same. So there's sort of three. You could decide that I don't want to be assigned to any tables, and I want to be able to, be free range and circulate across the tables as I would like. Or you can decide, no, actually assign us to tables, because then we can have a more in-depth understanding of what's happening. And the third is, often what trustees do as well is assign to a cluster of tables. That makes sure that all tables get a trustee there. So 7 trustees and 32 or so tables. So you'd have 4 or 5 tables each. That would be your go-to tables to listen, and keeping in mind that the role of the trustee is not to contribute ideas. The role of the trustee is to listen to ideas from the stakeholders around the table. And so so that we can plan, we just need to know what you'd like.
Craig.
It says it'll be a virtual format, or is it virtual and in person?
Yeah, the very first sentence says that it'll be a virtual format. So if we can just make sure that the communication is clear that it is in person and in person only.
Person.
There is no virtual component.
No,
there will be that you can provide feedback to these questions after, but it will not be virtually.
So
it will
it's
only
it's
be
in person.
In
100%
person
in
only.
no
100%
opportunity
in
for
person.
virtual.
Sorry, Craig, I missed that.
That's okay. And I'm up in Edmonton that day, and I will either be traveling or I'll be staying in Edmonton. I'm not sure yet. So unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the town hall.
That's unfortunate.
I know.
And I know that I had expressed to Cheryl that I would like to have a cluster, but that if we can ensure that within that cluster that the same that they aren't moving to a table outside of the cluster, so that they would be touched by, they would have an opportunity to have a trustee visit their table at some point in that evening. So if I was assigned 4 or 5 tables, I would ensure that I made it to the 4 or 5 tables. But if the participant moves to a table outside of my cluster, then I can't guarantee that they've had an opportunity to have a trustee sitting at the table.
So I understand what she's saying, Chris. We're talking about rotation within a cluster. So we can,
Yes.
we can make that work.
Okay.
If that's what the trustees would like. Yep.
So are others in favor of that? Okay, so we'll have a cluster of 4 or 5, and we'll just make sure that the parents that are in your cluster would remain in your cluster when they switch to another table. So you don't have to, so you can move just within the evening. You need to make sure that you've made it to all 5 tables.
Yep, that won't be hard. We can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good with that. Christina.
We had also discussed how we might support schools to offer accessibility services for if they have folks who are coming to town hall, for example, like interpreters or things like that. Is that still the case? Like,
Yeah,
if they identified a
we've
parent.
talked to schools certainly, and I know that we've got Joel working hard on ensuring that any families who are coming have support, and Sajin as well is doing that, and schools know that. Give us a call if you're thinking that people need support. Yeah.
Thank you.
Craig.
Just a follow-up. So we're going to make sure that on the website, it says in person, and it'll be at the Victoria Park School.
Yes, have we got that, Garrett? I think we have because we talked about it yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Not seeing any other comments or questions. Move on. We have a couple more items. The board strategic planning.
Right. So I sent that via email. I hope. Did I? Yes. No. Yes. Kristen, could you put I know I put it in the board folder. Draft board retreat agenda. Do you see that there? Yeah. Here we are. And so I'm just before we move forward with preparation, just wanted to make sure that I understood. I did review this with Allison and Jenny, but wanted to review with you. And so if the purposes, the goals, if I heard you right, I think that it's important that we all have consensus on what the goals are. Really to provide, the number one goal is provide governance direction for the 2023-2024 school division assurance plan. And that's sort of would be the goal of strategic planning. And so those are some of the main engagement pieces that we'll have, finalizing the school division values and determining if the priority areas need to change or need refinement, complete the governance domain in the school division assurance plan, provide feedback, identify gaps that may need to be addressed in the assurance plan based on the 2023 town hall results, as well as the 2021-2022 assurance results report. Review the budget, board budget belief statement, and discuss any recent government announcements regarding funding. That's always a fairly unknown right up until right before, depending upon government timelines for announcements. And so I've got the day structured there. I went through the timelines. I don't know if we need to go through the timelines, but we will start with board values, move into, and all of the results will be there. We've had good traction on the survey so far. I think 700 or so, Garrett, on the values survey. How many people in the values survey? Oh, 1,300 now. So we're getting really good response on that. And so you'll have good information for that piece. And then you'll use that to guide your discussion about, now let's look at our priorities. Do those priorities reflect our values? Do we need to change them? Do we need to do some different things with them? Do we need to consider how they align with the provincial assurance domains? Because that's how we have to report. So that'll be for the board to reflect on. We'll take a look, and I've built in quite a bit of time to reflect on the town hall results, and quite a bit of time for the board to work on the governance domain, because that's certainly in the assurance plan, you want it to reflect what, as a governing board, you would like it to be. Then we spend a significant time in the afternoon going through, sort of side by side. It's not going through the assurance results report, it's looking at the assurance results report. You might have questions, and then we take a look at the plan. Are those addressed in the plan? And are there areas where there's gaps, or there's areas that we see some great strengths that we need to continue or emphasize? Are there things that we need to shift, that we need to start in all of those areas there? And so what will be, for it to be mostly conversation centered, because executive council won't present, right? So instead we'll go to the section, and then we'll rely on the board then to say, I noticed this, or I have a question about that, or ask questions, and then we can begin to decide if there's areas that the board sees as needing attention. not necessarily to the point where the strategies will be put there, because that would be sort of what I do with our instructional leadership team, our admin in our schools, who then also work with their staff, right? But certainly in terms of overall direction, if the board is saying, I don't think we're putting enough resources here, or that we should have some stronger emphasis or focus here, because I see these things as gaps in our results report. So lots of room for questions and conversation there. And what we'll do is certainly resend digitally the assurance results report and the assurance plan. And I believe you've all have had hard copies of those. And so what we'll do is we'll get Kristen give you an email. If you need another one printed, then we'll do that for you as well, just to make sure that you've got that. And then we've got the wrap up. We're at the Galt Museum. Yeah, so which is nice, but we must depart at 4:30. We must, because that's when they close the building. So we must depart at 4:30. And what we've done is we've booked the Italian table to go over and have some social time and dinner together, right, in terms of the social piece that night. And so the next morning then we will gather back at the Galt, have breakfast together, and then I've put an hour there of recap time. So just in case from the day before, if there's loose ends I want to bring back and say, here's my understanding of where we're at with these things. Should we wrap them up this morning? Do we need to make different time? What do we need to do with these? And then I've left 2 hours there for Christine Lee. Budget belief statement, we heard that she wanted to do the budget development schedule. And if there's a provincial funding update, we won't know that. But certainly what we will be able to talk about is some budget challenges, priorities and considerations, and governance budget. I didn't put a break in there because it's sort of, budget topics are free flowing, and so it will be put in there right around 10:15. And it's my understanding that we've got a strong commitment to end at noon. And so that's what we'll plan to do. Is there any recommendations for change?
Craig?
If we go back to Thursday, I would feel more comfortable with finishing the governance thing at the end of the day instead of trying to finish it before, because some of these topics appear to be related to governance. And so I would feel more comfortable having had that discussion than wrapping it up as that governance thing would be the wrapping up of the day. That's my personal feeling, but I'd like to hear what other board members have.
If I'm remembering the conversation, we put it at the beginning because that's a must-have done. Like, where's do you know what I'm saying? Like that's like for us not to have that done. So even if that goes longer, for us not to have that done would be very difficult for me to move forward. We'd have to book another time to, okay. And that's all. And we can put it wherever you guys want, but.
Well, some of those topics we're going to discuss after we've done the governance part is part of governance. So I'm just making sure that we have enough time to discuss that and do the governance, what we want in governance also. So I mean, I'm flexible, but as long as we know that we could have to change that a little bit as we discuss things, I'm fine with that too. But just so that we don't just say, here it is, we've done this part, now we'll discuss these, without thinking that we might have to add something to governance. And that if we're flexible, I'm fine.
And I think if you recall from last year, we did go back and confirm that these were okay, and we can certainly make any edits or changes at that time. So it's not we've done it and we're done. It's we go through the rest, and if we need to go back, we go back.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Christina.
Just in the goals at the very top, if you don't mind scrolling back up, Chris. If I would recommend that we maybe just change the word review board budget belief statement to just maybe one of those more action-oriented words to reflect like the top, just because I think the request from last year was that it be a more like active conversation with a higher probability of like at least some editing. Yeah. Thank you. Just so we don't forget and then have the same feedback again.
I'm not seeing any further comments, so we're good to go ahead with that. And I know your team has a lot of planning to do, so thank you. And we'll just quickly do one last thing before we get to our guests, is the calendar of events. So Kristen can scroll. So I am wondering if you could please add, because this is calendar events for our Board of Trustees, is if you can please add our community conversations onto the calendars there, onto the calendar events. And you have those dates, Kristen? Okay, sounds good. Are there other dates that are missing, Christina?
This one was just set, but February 21st, Board Budget Committee.
Okay.
1 p.m. Board Budget Committee, February 21st at 1 p.m.
Jenny?
Kristen, do you mind sending out the RSVP things for the school tours for us? Those keep me on track so well. Thank you.
And for those that are planning anything for the February 14th Committee of the Whole, we have committed to being done at 5 o'clock in case you do have other plans that evening. So we will be done at 5 o'clock, and we have Mike presenting to us, Mike and his team presenting to us from 3 to 5. Craig?
Just so, we should just review it so that anyone listening would remember. We have a community conversation on Thursday, right?
Yep, and we'll get to that on the agenda when we have community
Okay.
conversations is on the agenda.
And then on the 14th also of February?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get to those actual. I just want it to be on the calendar that goes out to, that trustees look at for where do I need to be? It'll be on your calendar, but we will get to the community conversations. Okay. Anything else? We're good? Thank you. So with that, we have some guests here today from Chinook High School, and they're going to come and let us know about their trip that they have coming up. So if you guys can join us up here at the front, and we'll get some mics for you. People online can't hear unless you speak into the mic. Yep. Yep. So. The mic's not working.
No, we're good. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Sure. Oh, that's fun. That is less awkward for sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin. I teach at Chinook High School, social studies and psychology.
I'm Dwayne Piper, Vice Principal at Chinook High School, and moral support for Kevin today, but also just showing that admin is in full support of this incredible opportunity for our students.
Dwayne is tentatively a chaperone on the trip as well, so he is more than just moral support. He's being nice. We are hoping to run a tour next Easter break from March 29th through April 9th. We're looking to take 30 to 36 student travelers, hopefully, to the UK, specifically the capitals of the British Isles, and then a 2-day extension into Paris after that, for a total of 12 days, inclusive of travel. I have physical copies. Shall I distribute these? I know there is a digital copy as well, but I did print some off. You've got it. You have access to it. Okay, perfect. If you do want a physical copy of the proposal, I have that here as well. I think all the information is pretty much on the summary on page 2. That's the primary stuff. There's a detailed itinerary. There's some insurance information, travel protection coverage information from EF there as well that I included. But I think the summary on page 2, the proposal summary, does a pretty good job explaining. The purpose of the tour, obviously, it's very history focused. I'm a social studies teacher, so my primary interest is in the area of history and culture. And so all the events and opportunities on the tour are history or culture focused. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no worries.
Here, I can take half that way too.
That sounds great. Thank you, Dwayne. Yeah, thank you so much. I printed them in color and everything. Like I really went hardcore on that. So every opportunity on the tour is really history or culture focused. So lots of guided tours, lots of museums, lots of really good opportunities. The other thing mentioned in the rationale is that we've endeavored with EF to limit the amount of sort of free time on the tour. For two reasons. Number one, to make it as valuable as possible and pack as much in. And number two, also to reduce risk, because free time is, the time where trouble most likely would occur when you're not being directly with the tour director. The cost is there as well. I've broken it down. The cost listed on the proposal summary is inclusive of everything, including there are a few things that it's not inclusive of. I will talk about those, but it's basically what students would expect to pay. So the cost is approximately $5,000 per student traveler. This is inclusive of the program fee, which is flights, hotels, breakfast and dinner, transportation, activities, tour director, local guides, et cetera, et cetera. And then I've also worked into that estimated cost. We're going to make the global travel protection plan mandatory, which is $200 for students. After I attended the International Travel Risk Assessment Seminar, we talked about how we want to have both our coverage and EF's coverage. So we're just going to bake that right into the price, which is included in that $5,000 estimate. And then that $5,000 estimate also includes travel to and from Calgary and tips for the tour director, for local guides, and for bus drivers on tour, which is customary as well. So that $5,000 is inclusive of basically everything that's not optional. And then everything after that that students would have to think about is baggage fees, lunches, souvenirs, that sort of optional cost stuff. But I think all the information's there. But that's the summary of it. The detailed itinerary breaks it down in terms of like where we'll be going and what we'll be seeing. This is the most up-to-date information we have. So obviously some of this is contingent upon what happens in the next year and a bit, but yeah. That's basically what I had to say, but I'm wide open for questions.
Okay, I think Andrea and then Craig. Go ahead. Angela.
They flash. That's what that means.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Do you have some fundraising opportunities for students?
Thank you. Yeah. So fundraising this year is tough. We typically had a grocery card program at Chinook, but maybe Dwayne can speak more intelligently about this. I chatted with Bill about it, and there are some issues with the grocery card program this year, so we're not able to use it. So that is off the table. And then we also chatted about how like individual fundraising is complicated this year as well. Things like running bake sales and stuff like that. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, our direction from the Ed Center has been that the individual fundraising wasn't something that is really feasible anymore. And it was, maybe I can't answer this as intelligently as I wanted to. Yeah, it just came up with the grocery cards was specifically something that was a struggle because there was a 4% fee that was associated with that. The largest struggle, I believe, that came up, and we have another trip planned at Chinook High School. We have a social studies trip that is going to a World War I and II trip through Europe. And they ran into some troubles with fundraising because if a student does individual fundraising, that money goes through School Cash Online, and we can't pay EF tours directly. And in the past, the thought was that if the parent paid EF tours, then they would show the receipt to our finance person, and then we would give them the money from their School Cash Online account, but we are not allowed to do that. So there is no way for a student's individual fundraising from School Cash Online to get to EF tours in a way that our school division can handle. So those are the two ways that we were able to do it in the past. So we've been directed that we can't do either of those anymore. So EF Tours has, and it would be wonderful if we were told that we could actually do that, because I've done an international travel trip in the past, and there were lots of great opportunities for students to fundraise, and it was all through School Cash Online so that the school could look after it properly. But then, the payment to EF Tours is what's problematic now, we've been told.
Yeah, I know there's schools fundraising, so maybe it's a conversation that there might be some confusion, I'm thinking, because certainly there's fundraising that's happening in different schools, and certainly the education center has not said you can't. And there's the 4% is not new. There's always been a carefree charge for that. And so it's not a new fee. It's always been there. It's not a new percentage. And so maybe we just need to navigate a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we want fair and equal access, and fundraising, it helps with that quite a lot, right? And so if we can navigate how to get that money to EF Tours, that's, I think, what we need the help with. So we can have a conversation with that.
Yeah, well, that's something that we'll work on. We'll keep looking into it. There were a few other things as well. I know that EF has some fundraising opportunities through them as well. For example, all student travelers are given essentially like a GoFundMe website where they can solicit sort of donations from family and friends and all of that. And then they also they break it down into monthly payments as well, which makes it a little more reasonable. And the $5,000 cost broken down would be roughly about $400 a month for people who enroll as soon as possible, which I think is like a little more reasonable. So, for example, a lot of parents will, ask their student to pay a portion of it, getting a part-time job over the next year and a bit to help facilitate that. I think that's pretty reasonable as well. So, accessibility is important to us, so we will look into as many options as possible. Good question.
Oftentimes, students themselves will do their own bottle drives, their own fundraising just through their family, and then they, of course, have access to that money, and then they pay EF Tours themselves.
So I have Craig and then Jenny.
So this is to take place next year.
Yeah.
What's the deadline for registering to go on this?
I believe they have to have paid for the trip. I think it's 44 days in advance of the trip. And then they can register anytime until that. And so the last tour I ran with EF was in 2019, and we had students registering a couple of months beforehand as well. Actually, we had quite a few registrations in the few months leading up to it. And then they just put it on a credit card or whatever. They didn't have a lot of time to pay for it, but yeah, they can register all the way up until, I guess, March of next year.
And I was just looking at the itinerary. Is Notre Dame Cathedral going to be available, or is
Should
it
be
not?
fixed by then, yeah.
Should be fixed, but
no, actually, if you look, they sort of dance around that. You see Notre Dame, and that is about it. We won't be obviously going in it, but that's part of the guided walking tour around Paris. So yeah, sadly, I'm sure people will be really bummed about that, but I don't think it's on the tour yet.
Yeah, and I am jealous because I've been to Edinburgh with the rugby team, and
the
Royal Mile is something spectacular.
Yeah,
so,
amazing.
That in itself is worth the trip. So
great. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny.
So do students have the opportunity then to pay for their trip directly to EF Tours and avoid, because I know anything going through School Cash Online, you're losing that 4%. Do they have the opportunity to pay directly?
In fact, it's mandatory. The tour itself is paid for straight to EF. We don't handle that money at all. The only exception being we have to pay for bus to and from Calgary, and we have to pay for those tips out of School Cash Online, which I think equates to about $200 per traveler that goes through School Cash Online, because we actually take that money out, put it in envelopes, give it to the tour guides and stuff. So, but other than that, no, it's straight to EF.
Okay. And with that, I would say I would encourage a follow-up conversation with the fundraising. I know there was been a lot of confusion around using School Cash Online, where that 4% lies, how you can navigate it and still be profitable in fundraising. So I would encourage that ongoing conversation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Christina?
So this is maybe more a question for the board. So this is the second trip request First of all, thank you.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. Hi. Great trip. Looks fabulous. More of a question of process. This came up the last time we talked about places like France or places with like technically have a travel advisory, like as articulated in this application, like widely known to be like widely understood to be safe for travel. I just want to make sure that we're always on side of our own policy. Does this need to be like re-reviewed in some way? Because I just don't want to, put ourselves in a place of risk at approving things conditional on a policy to be met that we technically might not actually.
And the
meet.
motion would always, like, the motion speaks
I
to it,
understand that, but
but we'll let Marek.
sorry, go ahead.
As far as process goes, so we now have implemented within permission click, so the process that our staff have to enter in all of the information. They have to do a risk assessment piece, and then at the 60-day prior, they have to reevaluate that status of the travel conditions at that time. And if they've escalated or if something has happened, then we go back to the team. And I mean, Kevin, you and I are old friends with Greece, but we go back to it and review it. So we've added extra steps within the permission click process. Bit of a burden for our teachers because our permission click already, they've got to put in a lot of information, but now we have an immediate like check so that if that were to be red flagged, then we'd be following up before they go, and as well, hopefully before they need a reimbursement for travel if the trip has to be canceled.
Okay. Perfect. And so by our policy, we're within bounds to approve trips that were to places where it's the caution is exercise a high degree of caution. This is fine. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I just remember that was a big conversation last time. Someone wanted to go to France. So fabulous. Looks great. Thank you. I agree. The board always does really prioritize making sure there's access, and in terms of these are very expensive trips and but also very high impact. So anything we can do to support student access is great.
Craig and then Jenny.
If 60 days out, because this is like 13 months, 14, 15 months from now, 3 months from April next year, if there's a travel advisory that changes everything.
So actually that's one of the main reasons why we are baking in the 199 global travel protection plan that EF offers as well, because that offers some cancellation, some fairly comprehensive cancellation coverage. But then the outbound student plan that we use with study insured also covers them for that. So then they're double covered for EF's really good. They know people wouldn't book trips if there weren't some sort of contingencies in place for COVID regulations potentially shifting or changing. So they would have, double coverage. The outbound student plan covers up to $5,000 of trip cancellation prior to departure. And then I have information in here about the global travel protection plan as well. It covers a similar amount. So they would be double covered by us forcing them to sign up for that insurance. Yeah.
Jenny.
My question was just along those same lines, and this is just purely from a position of curiosity, just because I haven't seen anyone. We have lots of these opportunities to hear about these fun trips and dream. But I haven't seen anyone make that decision to add that additional protection plan yet. And so I was just curious what additional coverage that offers and what led to your decision to add that. If you don't mind speaking to that.
No, not at all. So I have a page in here that's the Global Travel Protection Plan information, like the breakdown of what it covers. And essentially it meshes very well with the student plan that we already have in place through Study Insured. It's sort of just an element of double coverage. The primary reasons why you would want that is the cancellation coverage. That's the main reason why we would, obviously, if a student called EF and said, I do not want this coverage, they could remove it and save $200, but we're essentially making it mandatory, just so it's not an option. They have to opt out of it, basically. But yeah, so the cancellation coverage is the big one, but it also has coverage for accidents and illness and a wide variety of different things. If you lose your property, if you have things stolen, if you have a baggage delay, it covers all of that stuff. So it's essentially just a double layer of protection because the trips are expensive and because it is an investment. And we were advised to encourage students to purchase outside insurance as well, in addition to the student coverage we have. So yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? So I agree, looks like a fabulous trip, and I think many board members would say if you're looking for more people, let us know. We'll help supervise and chaperone. But and my comments are similar in that making sure that it is accessible, that it isn't about privilege for the students that go on the trip. So if we can just confirm that fundraising is an opportunity for them to be able to individually contribute to their trips would be important for me. So seeing no more comments, just looking for somebody that would like to make that motion. Craig?
I move that the Chinook High School trip to the British Isles in April 2024 be approved by the board on the condition that all division policies and procedures are strictly followed, and with the understanding that future travel advisories and or vaccination requirements may affect the trip's ability to proceed.
Sounds good. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? And that's carried. Enjoy your trip.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you for your time.
So Avis is here, so we're going to jump ahead and do the first quarter financial report. And Avis has promised it's going to be fun and exciting, and we're right. Ooh, I don't know about that. I didn't see them come in cages.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Okay, so all right, so I'm pleased to present the 2022-2023 first quarter report ending November 30th, 2022. And I know that sometimes it is a little hard to see on here, but so if you wanted to go to page 3 of your document, this will be the page that we're going over, just in case. Sometimes I know that it is a little hard to see on there, but so if you've got it in front of you, if that's helpful. So this presentation is an overview of the quarterly reporting and is a supplement to the actual quarterly report, which provides additional details on the first quarter. So this report is based on the operating budget, which is the September 30th budget, and is as it more accurately represents the operations of the division. And similar to previous presentations, we will display the financial data by budget, forecast, and year to date. So first off, starting with revenues, Overall is comparable to forecast forecast was 26.1% as of November 30th, and we have received 25.2% of budgeted revenues. The largest variance relates to the SGF activities. SGF activities, which is fees and fundraising collected, is under forecasted, which is offset by the Alberta Ed funding, which is higher than forecasted due to the timing of some grants that were received, as well as an increase in investment income, which is higher than forecast due to the higher interest rates that the division's GICs currently have. For expenditures, overall comparable to forecast was at 27.4% as of November 30th, and is at we have spent 26.4% of budgeted expenses. So then we're going to go into both by department and by type. Let's see, yeah, we'll go down here, and this is where we want to be. So ECS, this includes reporting for both pre-K and kindergarten programs. Forecasted costs are at 29.1%, and year-to-date is at 28%. Costs are higher than the average 25% that we would expect, as the majority of the staff in this category are paid over 10 months versus 12. So overall, it is in line with budget. For instruction for grade 1 to grade 12, forecasted costs are 26.7%. Year-to-date is 25.4%. Within instructional, the majority of the programs are within forecasted costs, with SGFs and the institutional programs currently being the lowest under budget. Operations and maintenance forecasted costs are 32.7%. Year-to-date is 29.6%. Contracted services, other services, and supplies are all currently under forecasted costs. The timing of bigger projects can impact this. Exactly, yeah. But overall, it is in line with budget. Transportation forecasted costs were 29.6%. Year-to-date is at 30%. So this budgeted number here does not take into account any potential additional revenue that Alberta Ed has been giving monthly for any fuel contingency pricing. So for quarter 1, for September, we didn't receive any. For October, we received 8,000, and for November, we received 10,000. How they calculate if you receive that funding is if diesel costs are over an average of $1.25. So the 18,000 we have received offsets the $12,000 difference there. So that's just one thing we wanted to note, that it is over the forecasted, but there is additional revenues that have come to cover it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we expect that fuel cost contingency funding to continue? Is that,
as far as we understand,
it's one of
it's reevaluated monthly. They introduced it June of last year, and so it's been monthly. It just depends on the price of diesel throughout the province. It would be maybe hopeful for then following next year, maybe they'll just take that funding and put it into transportation. For system administration, the forecasted cost is at 32.9. The year-to-date is 33.8. So the dollar value here is approximately $36,000. So upon further investigation, it showed that the contracted services were over the forecasted costs by about $40,000. The main expense within the contracted services is our computer services, the main one being Power School. So the forecasted costs had been 75% in quarter 1 and 25% in quarter 3, but we've been working with Power School to align our invoices so they all are in quarter 1. So it should be 90% for quarter 1 and 10% for quarter 3 going forward. So that will be updated in quarter 2. I kind of caught it while I was doing my analysis. I was like, why is this higher? So that is why that is, but overall, everything is still within budget. And then last but not least, with external services, which is our international program. So the forecasted costs were at 25%, and the year-to-date is at 47.6. And while I know that that does look alarming, the revenue earned within this program thus far has covered all the costs. And the timing of the payments, particularly to the third-party homestay agency, depends on when the students arrive. And there were many students who arrived at the beginning of the year. So for the types of expenses for salary, benefits, and professional development, forecasted costs were at 25.6 and year to date is at 25.3. So everything is right in line. It's important to note too that some tax costs like EI and CPP will restart in January 2023. Contracted services, forecasted costs are at 33.4. Year to date is at 29.5. Utility costs are currently higher than forecasted in this quarter. However, savings in this quarter in audit, legal, and consultants have offset, so they remain under budget. For other services, the forecasted cost is at 77.6. Year to date is at 76.2. The reason why this is so much higher than the anticipated 25% is because the division's insurance comes out of this area and it's paid at the beginning of the year. And within that 2 million, it's over 50% of that amount. So that's why it's so much higher. As well, rentals and printing, which are the other two higher, the next two highest categories in this area, were also under forecasted costs. Supplies, forecasted costs were at 28.7. Year to date is at 28.4, so we're right in line there. Other expenditures, forecasted costs were at 25%. Year to date is at 22.9. So there are currently savings within contingency, travel, and car allowances. And lastly, forecasted costs for transfers, SGFs, and capital IMR were at 31.3. Year to date is at 22.8. Main reason for this is the less than forecasted SGF expenses, which correlates to the less than forecasted SGF revenues above too. Yeah.
The carbon tax, it's supposed to increase again. Do we get a rebate back on the carbon tax as a division
Not
for our utilities, or are our utilities going to go up because the carbon tax is going up?
I know that we are in a fixed contract for our utilities till 2028, I believe. So that's we do have a fixed rate there, which is good. In terms of a rebate, I don't believe that we get any at this time.
Okay. So our utility shouldn't have a big increase even though the carbon tax is going up in April.
I know that I believe, like, to explain it, I know that like it's not called like utilization rate, but it would be like the rate is not changing. And then those would be like your administrative costs. So those are most likely to fluctuate. Okay. All right. Then I know also this is a little hard to see, but if you go to page 5 of your report, it'll have a bigger chart. So as of November 30th, the net financial assets are at 13.51 million compared to 17.22 million in the prior year. The majority of this reduction is the decrease in cash and cash equivalents, which is expected because we are spending some reserve funds. The non-financial assets are net to 20.49 million as of November 30th, 2022, compared to 23.17 million in the prior year. And the majority of this reduction is due to amortization of capital assets. And then if anybody has any other further questions, I am happy to answer them.
I have a question. I'm not seeing any others. So
yeah, absolutely.
Just going back to the external services one where it was up 47.6%.
Yes.
And I know that you said that we just haven't gotten that money yet.
No, sorry. So we have received we do have revenues to cover those expenses. And then the expenses it's mostly timing of payments. So it's kind of harder to that when we do a basic 25, 25, 25, 25, it might be something to look at too, because we do have lots of students starting at the beginning of the year that maybe it is for forecasted costs. We do kind of more 70, 30 or something like that. It just usually depends when the students arrive. Yeah.
So there's no concern that it won't cover everything that is necessary.
It will. Yeah, it will cover. Yeah.
Will be good.
Okay. Yes, you bet. I know.
It's just going to be at a different time.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's like, what? Yes. Okay. But
Jenny.
My question was around the same thing. So just to clarify, so because we're budgeted for 300,000 annually there, but we've spent roughly half
Yes.
at this point instead of our anticipated quarter. Do we still anticipate that at the end, at year end, we will still be coming in at 300,000, or are we anticipating we will have had more students than we ever anticipated and we will be over budget here?
So the thing with the instructional students is that if there are more students coming in, so there's more expenses, there's also more revenue because they're going to be paying their fair share of coming in. So even if the expenses are more than 300,000, there will be more students coming in to cover those costs.
That budget always balances itself.
Yeah, it kind of it's its own separate kind of area.
That's simply only the international
Yes,
student
there's nothing
program.
else in there. You bet.
Okay, thank you for
Yeah, of
clarifying
course.
it.
Other questions? Not seeing any, so we do need to approve the first quarter financial report. So is that Christina, your hand is up? Getting the mic that works.
I think it works.
Christina, are you able to scroll up to the motion or you've got
I've got
on
it
your
here,
screen?
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I motion that we approve the 2022-2023 first quarter financial report as presented.
Seeing no further questions or comments, those in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you.
Mavis.
Thank you, guys.
It wasn't so painful. But there was no flying monkeys. I'm disappointed, Morag. Yes. Next time we got monkeys. Perfect. Okay, so we are going to go back to the policy review portion, the 8.2. And Craig, I understand that you are going to be covering this piece. So we did add the 207 policy as well. So if you want to start with 500.1, the student rights and responsibilities.
Student rights and responsibilities. This is recommended to go forward to the board. Now, I was down in California, so I forgot to write it down, so Cheryl can help me. Did the committee feel that this should end up being a procedure eventually? Or should it be amalgamated with a policy?
I have it written in my notes, but I think this one was continuing to be a policy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was in the, yeah,
the
and
governance
it gives the support for actions that are taken that hold accountability, hold
Right.
individuals to
Okay.
account.
Thank you. So you can see the changes, what we deleted and what we've added. Yep. So the first change is, of course, it's the it's the Education Act, not the School Act, and it's the Alberta regulations. And the addition to the regulations have access to channels of communication in accordance with policy 1003.1, channels of communication and disputes resolution. And under students, we deleted on the fourth bullet, comply with the rules of the school, and we put in, we just deleted that. And we put down, added on on the bottom one, after school property during the school day or by electronic means. And we added accountable to the students, teachers, and other school staff for the students' conduct, positively contribute to the student, school, and community. And then on the last part, these are just the sections of the Education Act and other statutes. We added the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we added the Appendix A of 501.1. And 502.1, we put student code, and then we added 10,000 or 1,003 channels of communication and dispute resolution. So I guess we'll do this each individually, or if we have any questions.
Yep, we'll just go for questions, but I think Morag has a comment first, and then Christine.
Sorry, just could we scroll back up for one quick second?
Sure.
Well, there, the last bullet, I just wanted to reread it. So refrain from report and not tolerate bullying or bullying behavior directed towards others in the school, whether or not it occurs on school property during the school day or by,
As from the Education Act.
okay, so
Directly.
the timing of it is during the school day or by electric means, not by electric means during the school day.
Yeah.
It's word for word from the Education Act, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yep, so Christine?
I think it's those, but on that, on the bottom of that, this first page, policy is covering a word. Is it those accountable? Am I correct in my
Oh,
assumption?
that could be, yeah.
There's a word that's just covered by that text box of policy.
During the school day.
But there's SE and then accountable. So there's something,
Oh, I think it means example, IE is example.
is that an I?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't look like an I on my page.
And so,
Okay, so if that could just be, oh, interesting.
yeah, I don't know what. that cut in.
Okay. Okay.
Be
Be accountable. Thank
Yeah,
you.
be
That, okay, that
accountable.
works. So if that could just be clarified so
Yeah.
that we can see the full
So it
words.
should be accountable.
And then a second, just input, you've added have access to channels of communication. And I appreciate that. Would it be more clear and approachable if we worded it be made aware of channels? If you're made aware of, you know where to access.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like everybody by policy has access. So that's not an issue, but to be made aware of.
I think that's a reasonable addition. Be married, so it'd be, instead of have access, be made aware of access.
Make sure you're putting on your mic. Sorry.
To be made aware of and have, I would appreciate having the awareness piece in there.
So could you say have information and access to channels of communication?
Being made aware of is intentional, right? It's, if there's an issue coming forth, I want to know that
It's just a double
that
verb.
piece. No, I know,
Kind
but
of.
just hear the intent though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's accountability that knowledge and information is being passed, right?
Yeah.
Cheryl and then Jenny.
I want to make the point that whatever we put in policy has to be doable. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if we don't do that, then we're subject to liability, right? And so while I think it's great intent to say, have the right to awareness of communication channels, I'm just trying to think how we're going to make sure that our students actually have, do you know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to think, how are we going to make sure? So a student could come, so if there's something, this is to make sure that everyone understands their rights and their responsibilities. And so if someone says, well, I didn't know, and we said, well, it's in the student handbook, it's on the school webpage, and then someone could argue, well, that's not making sure that I'm understanding that right. That's, you're not making me, you didn't uphold your responsibility. I had the right to know about these things, and I didn't know about those things, so you didn't fulfill your responsibility to make sure that I knew about them. And so I'm just a little cautious of wording that way when we guarantee that someone's going to be aware of something. Can be somewhat problematic.
Jenny and then back to Christine.
I had, I think, a similar comment of just be made aware of. Sometimes you can give people all the information in the world and they still don't absorb it. And so sometimes being made aware of something there's a personal responsibility associated with that as well. And so I think I'm maybe thinking maybe a little bit like it's tough for us to commit ourselves to making somebody aware, but we can commit ourselves to providing education on or about channels of communication or providing the information or I mean already we're making it accessible, but do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, Christine?
No, I appreciate that. But it's funny, the three things you just said, I am hearing it as making aware. So I'm correlating all those things together. But I guess as I was listening to you, Cheryl, would it then come under procedure rather than policy? Would that be the proper place for that?
Yeah, I think, you know, and that schools, and when you take a look at, you know, schools have a responsibility too, for example, in there, if you take a look under the student code of conduct piece, schools have a responsibility to make sure that that is in handbooks, to make sure it's on their website, to make sure it's communicated, and in part that gives the channels of communication pieces, right? And so I think, you know, for when someone says they have the right um, to make someone aware can be a very high bar for us to be able to demonstrate that we did so. Because what is the bar on that? How do we have to personally tell each student? Do we put it in a handbook? Do we put it on the website? Do we? I think a procedure though, because I think we do need, and especially as we get into age of more and more and more communication, how is it that we're making sure that, for example, their rights and responsibilities are both clear and articulated and understood?
I appreciate the reminder of the handbook. So
You're good?
I'm good. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Andrea?
I'm just wondering, in the bottom statement, if we could add the apostrophes to add understanding the students, teachers and or school staff for the students' conduct. We're wanting it apostrophe after the S or before the S, positively contribute to the student, school, and community. Is it the school belonging to the students?
Because the conduct belongs to the student, right? Yeah, yeah. So students' conduct. Yeah, no, it should be, the conduct belongs to the student.
And then
yeah.
also the students, teachers, like the teachers belong. Yeah, and then also the student, school, just for understanding.
Yep.
Because otherwise it reads as to the students, school, and community.
Yeah. Okay, Craig? I don't know if your mic is on, just knowing that.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. I move that we accept policy 500.1, student rights and responsibilities as amended by the board.
Thank you. And any further comments or questions? Those in favor? And that's carried. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, the second one is 502.3, suspensions and expulsions. So as we go through this, we added the words the safety of self and or others. And one of the, and it says number 4, a suspension or expulsion shall be used in response to conduct which is injurious to the physical or mental well-being of others in the school. And under regulations, it's section 236 of the Education Act. And it says that if a student is taking a bus, they have, or a student from attending class, course, school activity, school, or from riding on school authorized transit for a period of 5 school days or less, unless in accordance with the provisions outlined in section 37 of the Education Act. And the addition, we deleted some words there, and then the principal or designate may suspend a student. And in 1 point, we added 1.23. We changed the word from sponsored to school-related activities. And 1.24, we added from school authorized transit. And then 1.25, parents/guardians or independent students shall be informed. And the reason we've done that is because we do have a number of independent students in our division, and they have no guardian or parent, and so you have to get a hold of them. And again, we just added or designate to the principal. And 1.4, the student remains suspended until a decision has been made with respect to proceeding to expulsion. Now, the expulsion part, are there any questions up until then? Basically, we're just following the school act, the Education Act, sorry.
Christina.
For the principal or designate under suspension 1.3 and 1.4, it just says just the principal. Is that intended to be the principal or designate throughout, or just the? So if the designate had authority to suspend a student, we would require that the permanent principal be back in order to reinstate them.
Right.
Like we wouldn't give the
I'll
same
let-
principal the authority to reinstate that suspension.
Cheryl?
Or
The principal would have to oversee that because that's in the Education Act. So
Oh.
we're still giving them the authority, even though it may be the designate who does the communication, the meeting and all of that piece. The principal has the ultimate authority in the Education Act to do so.
okay, yeah, I guess I'm just concerned about, like, it's one of those, like, it would be a 0.001% chance that would ever happen, but that a designate could suspend someone, but we would have to wait for the return of the full like the, whatever the right word is, non-designate principal, to come back. So it just feels like
Yeah, and if there was a principal that was gone,
Yeah.
there'd be an acting principal in place, right? So in the absence of a principal,
Yeah.
Then that person actually is an acting principal and would be principal.
Okay, so then in that case, sorry, it's probably just my understanding then. In that case, who is a designate for the principal under 1.2?
The acting principal.
So in that case,
No, we
I-
wouldn't have, yeah. So
sorry.
a designate would be a vice principal. Really, it's intended so that a vice principal can suspend
Okay,
a student, right?
A vice
The vice
principal
pres-
could suspend, but a
Yes.
vice principal could not reinstate a
Right,
student.
right. The principal would reinstate, yeah.
Okay.
And that just might be the vice principal saying, can Cheryl, there just has to be the official, Cheryl's coming back to school piece, right? Do you want me to write the letter that Cheryl's coming back to school and have the meeting with the parent?
Okay.
Jenny?
So just scrolling back up to number 4 under where you deleted the words moral tone of and added in the piece about physical or mental well-being. And it says of others in the school. I wondered about those three words in the school, because it almost indicates that there's a requirement for it to have happened in the school, but we've just made a shift to say that this, regardless of whether or not this has happened on school grounds or not. So I'm just wondering if those words in the school are necessary or are a little bit misleading.
Christine?
And maybe I'm not the person to respond, but when I look at this, how has the action affected students that are in the school? So if an incident happens online outside of school hours, but it affects a student within the school, that's a direct correlation, right? And so how is it affecting people that attend the school? Do they feel safe attending the school following
whatever incident happened. So it's not saying, and I'm not reading it as it's happened in the school, but how is the effect transferring to the humans in the school and their experience? That's how I'm reading that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I see that, yeah.
Cheryl, you had your hand up. You're
Yeah,
good.
I was going to say the same. It's the Education Act language, and the intent is that, in other words, it can't be if a student were to have conduct that was injurious to someone in the community, for example, right? It has to be someone in the school, like of the school, I guess might be a better word. But the Education Act has in, and that's sort of the intent of that. So it's not if they were to bring harm to someone who's not associated with the school community.
Not seeing any further. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, now we get to the expulsion, and of course, most of this is in compliance with the Education Act. If a student is suspended in accordance with Section 36, the principal may recommend prior to the end of the student's suspension that the board expel the student. If 1.1, the student has displayed an attitude of willful, blatant, and repeated refusal to comply with Education Act Section 31. 1.2, the student has displayed an attitude of willful, blatant, and repeated refusal to comply with the code of conduct established under the Education Act, Section 33.2. And 1.3, the student's conduct, whether or not the conduct occurs within the school building or during the school day, is injurious to the physical and mental well-being of others in the school. Or 1.4, the student has distributed an intimate image of another person in the circumstance described in the Education Act, Section 1, brackets 1.1. So and this is basically from the School Act or Education Act.
Christine.
Two questions. One was why was the definition of expulsion taken out of here when there's a definition of suspension? That was my one question. And then in 1.3, to have matching language, do we want to say is injurious to the, nope, where was I? 1.3, whether or not the conduct occurs within the school building, during the school day, or by electronic means. Do we want to add electronic means to expulsion as well? And that was 1.3, Craig.
That's a good point. I know in other policies we've specified electronic means.
In 500.1 we did.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was.
Yeah, we
Looking at
probably
that
should be
matching language.
consistent on the wording. So I would probably agree that we should add somehow electronic means.
Morg.
If we're talking about injurious, electronic is included, really. I mean, injuries to the physical or mental well-being of others in the school. Whatever the cause is really doesn't need to be outlined here. I think if we look at within the suspension piece, that is included in the Education Act. If we look at the expulsion criteria of the 4 points, they do not include electronic in that. So.
Really what it's saying is that any kind of behavior that blatantly is injurious to the physical and mental well-being of others in the school. And so I think, it would include everything. And I mean, 1.4 kind of indicates also that could be electronic or paper distribution of intimate images.
Christine.
I think clear is kind, and I think I would appreciate it being specified because I think we can say that it's assumed and we should know, but if somebody's coming to this and we've used similar language in another policy, I would appreciate seeing a flow of like language.
I would leave it to the dictate of the board. If they feel that that should be included, I'm more than willing to include it. And
So what we see
Where
here,
does
though,
it say electronic means? We're just missing that.
In 500.1, are you looking in this one, the one that we're looking at right now? Okay, so it's not in there. So I'm asking to add it. So in one, yeah. So
Oh,
in
I know why, because
1.3
it's not in the Education Act.
So then sorry, can I?
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, I
So
was
then-
getting long, sorry.
So then in 500.1, on that last bullet, refrain from, report, and not tolerate bullying, etc., we added during the school day or by electronic means. Was that added in that policy because it's in the Education Act? But so then the
that's
Education
what
Act
we
is
were
inconsistent.
just told, yeah.
So then do we have to do it so this is my other question I'll throw out while people are looking. Are we allowed to add language? Like, do we have to take it verbatim from the Education Act, or are we allowed to add that to our policy?
Sure.
You'll be holding yourself to a higher standard than the board needs to in terms of potential liability for making a decision that would be not one that you have to be held to.
And I would be concerned under the expulsion piece. It's one thing clear as kind in
student-
other parts, but when we're looking at the expulsion piece, I would strongly advise as a board that we follow exactly what is in the Education Act, with it being such a serious topic. In the other pieces, clear as kind is appropriate. This, I think that we need to follow what we would be expected to be following.
And under
And I
student
think if it's a
responsibility.
clear,
Go ahead.
sorry,
Christine.
if it's a clear quote from the Education Act, then I'm fine. Yeah,
Okay.
I just wasn't sure if
And
it was
Cheryl and then Craig.
The Education Act does state for student responsibilities, it does include or by electronic means. Yeah, at this. So under student responsibilities, it's not in the suspension or in the expulsion sections.
Okay, Craig.
yeah, it was the feeling of the committee that we just take what's in the Education Act. And honestly, if someone breaks 500.1, that could mean that this could take place. Number 2 under
Just hang
expulsion.
on a second. Go ahead, Mike.
Maybe I'll wait till we get done this part on expulsion, and then I think there's one more back to Christina's point that I think we need to clarify here, because I think we're so Christina had mentioned that in the policy, if you just scroll back up to the suspension part, go up a little bit further. You added in the principal or designate may suspend a student, and then you pointed out, well, the return, it doesn't say the principal. The reason it was originally worded that way is to be consistent with the Education Act. In the Education Act, you only have the people who only exist are superintendent, secretary, treasurer, principal, and teacher. Vice principal doesn't exist in the Education Act. That's why it refers to principal all the time in these things, because they're the only person cited that would be in the building in the Education Act. Technically, a teacher can also suspend for a class. They have some rights. So I think the question that we have to do, that we didn't really fully get to, is you've added designate there, and I think you're exactly right. Do we want to be consistent with what's in the Education Act? Because if so, then we don't want to say designate in there. If we're okay with not being consistent with the Education Act, then we would add designate in those other parts. And so I think that's informing part of the discussion we're having here. Personally, I don't think adding designate in here one way or another makes much of a difference. I think you're much better when it comes to the expulsion stuff, making sure that we're consistent with the Education Act gives you lots of room and latitude to deal with a specific situation. But it's just because we were talking about that, and that's a decision we need to make. Are we going to be consistent with exactly what the Education Act says? And for the most part, we probably will. And are there some spots where maybe we deviate from that because it just makes sense procedurally and operationally?
Does that help, Christina, on that previous piece?
Yeah, and oh, sorry, you can go ahead, Cheryl.
Cheryl?
Because I think Mike's right now that we go back, that we've got, or does, I think if I'm remembering the conversation, Craig, it was the school admin rep there that said, this doesn't reflect what happens in practice because our schools, our high schools are quite large. And so certainly it's many times that the VPs act are the ones that, because sometimes they split it by grade level. And so it might be a VP who's doing that. So I don't think there's anything that would get us in trouble with or designate, but I think Christina was right. I think it was Christina who said it's not consistent or designate. So we should also have the or designate reinstate if we're going to have a or designate. So that would be so we have to make a decision or the other, have or designate or not have or designate. Because if we're going to have or designate, then it should be in 1.3. And it can't be in 1.4 because only principal could write a recommendation for expulsion, but it should be in 1.3.
Right, Christina has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the alignment with the act is definitely the priority. And I think we want to, just as feedback, perhaps when policies like this specifically that are very act heavy come, perhaps that could be some feedback about these are the edits made from the act so that we don't even have to debate them because we have to do them. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, perhaps that. So for example, for principal or designate in the act 36.3 is a principal may suspend a student, and then the list that we have. I'm nervous that if we added designate, that waters down. To me, that's taking too much liberty with the act versus if we added electronic means as holding ourselves to more, but adding a designate holds ourselves to less. If we give permission for suspension to more people, to me, that contravenes the act versus if we hold ourselves to a higher account of what we consider bullying. So that would be my concern. Yeah. I think the designate makes sense if we just make it throughout, but that would be my initial hesitation.
Okay, Craig?
Yeah, I think it was clear from the admin rep that in reality, things happen and the principal might be in some other part of the school. A decision has to be made. And when you have 13 or 1400 students, or even where you have a principal that has to go out for any reason and someone else is in there as a vice principal or as a designate, you have to allow them the opportunity to suspend if it comes to it. And I just agree, we should be consistent in the language. But again, 1.4, you can't change it because that is the principal's. So a designate would tell the principal that he suspended a student for a day or 2 days or whatever. The principal then would write a letter to the superintendent. It wouldn't be the designate. So I do agree. I think we could add the principal or designate may reinstate a student, 1.3, because the principal might tell the vice principal, well, you're in charge of grade 11 or grade 10 or whatever. And if you feel that that's been enough, reinstate them. I guess that's how I look at it, to be consistent and trying to make sure that we have, and like it says, in reality, these things do happen like that.
Cheryl, then Jenny, and then Christina.
In reality, that would be the way it is in almost any big high school across Alberta. It's certainly not the principal who, actually in some of the bigger high schools in Calgary, the principal probably never suspends. Students would only invoke their responsibility if it came to a recommendation for expulsion. And so Christina brings up a good point. Do we lower the standard and get ourselves in trouble that way? I think that trying to reflect what actually happens is more in better legal stead than do something that's not in policy. You know what I'm saying? So if the reality is, if we were to say to our schools, by policy only the principal can suspend, that's just not going to happen. It's not. And so by having it in policy and being clear and transparent that it's principal or designate, because I think we should say administrator designate to be clear that it's not a teacher. I think we should have or administrator designate. And there's many things, for example, that in policy or in the school act is superintendent that Mike does or Christine does or Morag does. right? Just simply by virtue of size and but it's understood that it's designated, right? And the responsibility still lies with the principal, but they've designated. It's just like across the executive council team, they don't say associate superintendent in the Education Act, but there's things that Mike and Morag make decisions on for sure, that I'm responsible for, but they make the decisions and they have their name attached to those decisions in the letters, right? Even though I'm held ultimately to account for that if something were to go awry. And so that would be the same here, but I think we should say administrator designate, and then we know it's an administrative person, not someone, because teacher is above, teacher's in 1.1, is in 1.1, and that's all the teacher really should have authority to do is from a class. 1.2 would, to me, would be principal or administrator designate.
Okay, Jenny and then Christina.
That clarified what I was going to say. Do we define who a designate is? But I think that covers that, because do people know they are a designate? Do they? So I think that covers that. And then my other question, but if we're satisfied with that, then anyways, my other question was going to be, if this wasn't written into policy, would principals still have the autonomy at their own level to make the decision to appoint a designate that could do this if it wasn't in policy? Like, if this is their practice at school already, can they do that without the word designate being in here?
Well, they have been, and that's what's in practice, and they can. But in terms of if there's ever going to be a source of contention right over the policy, let's say a parent says, well, it says that, because we have to remember people take policy very literally, right? And sometimes, and policy is always open and subject to interpretation. And so if a parent were to read this and say, well, it says the principal, only the principal could do that, and it was the vice principal who did that, we can say, well, no, it's in the policy, it was the administrator designate, right, who did that. And I think it just makes it more transparent to parents and students that because I think it's easy for a parent to say, well, it says principal, and it wasn't the principal. And I think by saying or administrator designate, it makes it more transparent in terms of what actually happens in a secondary school.
Andrea, is that your hand up? Okay, go ahead.
Would that cover a school where there is no vice principal? Because when you say administrative designate, does that mean that teacher who is standing in for the principal that day is that?
Yeah, an acting principal is defined in the well, not defined, but it's part of the Education Act. So yes, in a school setting where you didn't have a vice principal, you could designate for a day. If you're the principal and you're gone, you would designate an acting principal.
That happening, because I'm sure that teacher would like the principal or Mike or myself or Mark right before, because they would probably likely need some guidance through processes for that. Yeah.
Craig.
So I'm getting the feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we should add to 1.2 or administrator designate, and on 1.2.5.
Are you under expulsion or which one?
We're under suspensions right now.
Okay.
And then 1.2.5 or administrator designate, and that we would add in 1.3 on, I guess, we could add or administrative designate may at any time reinstate a student suspended under clause 1.1, 1.2. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Now, we'll go on. The board may make a decision to expel if we've read that. If the principal has recommended that the board expel a student and the student has been offered another educational program by the board. Number 3, the board delegates to the expulsion committee the power to make decisions with respect to the expulsion of students. Now, I still have a problem with number 3, because if this is a governance matter and an expulsion can be appealed to the board. 2 trustees does not make, as far as I'm concerned, a legal, can't make a legal decision because it's not the majority of the board. So I am still a little unsure about this one, because if you want to have any legal standing, it has to be at least 4 trustees. And because, I mean, right away, a parent or a student, if they're smart, could appeal this right to the minister. And because we only have 2 trustees, we made a decision that's a legally binding decision that the board didn't have the power. We didn't approve it, I guess. So I have a problem with that part of the thing, and I'm open to discussion on that.
So Morgan, you had a comment?
Just give me 2 seconds because I'm just reviewing the Education Act, because it does not stipulate that the entire board. The principal recommends expulsion under subsection 1. The principal shall immediately inform the board, report in writing to the board all the circumstances, and the student remains suspended until the board has made a decision. The student and the student's parent may make representations to the board with respect to the principal's recommendation to expel the student. The board shall, within 10 school days after the initial date of the suspension, make a decision to return the student or expel the student. The board may expel a student under subsection 4 only if the principal has recommended that the board expel the student. If the student is expelled under the section, the expulsion takes effect immediately. The board may establish rules or conditions for an expelled student respecting the circumstances. An expulsion or any rule or condition under subsection 7 may apply to the student. I'm just looking at process now, so just give me a second. Yeah, it's silent on that piece. When a student is expelled under this section, the board shall ensure that the students provided with a supervised education program consistent with the requirements under the Act, ensure that the student is provided with supports, make all reasonable efforts to ensure. I think the issue that I've experienced with expulsions before is the timing, and bringing a whole board together in a timely fashion. Those 10 days is almost next to impossible typically. And so that's the expedience piece, especially given that you don't want to get to the 10-day. If it's after 5, you've got a very short window of time to get everyone together to hear out that situation. That would be my experience in the past anyway.
Craig?
My experience is that as long as you have a majority, so if a board had 6 members, four could come, they can make the decision for the board. If we have 7 members, 4 need to be there. If you had 9, 5 have to be there. It just has to be a majority, because in the Education Act, it says a majority of trustees constitute a meeting. So what is our majority? 4. And legally, I would think that you would have to have 4 people make a decision to expel. Because if you don't, then you have 2 trustees, according to this policy, that are making a decision that supposedly is legally binding on the board, but the board, the majority of the board members haven't discussed it, which it doesn't say you have to have the whole board there, just the majority, which is 4 in our circumstance. So I just feel a little uncomfortable with that part, but I leave it up. I'll open it up and people can talk about it. But I'm just thinking of legality and governance policy according to the Education Act.
You have a comment, Mike?
I'll make a very quick comment. And I've certainly seen it done both ways. I think ultimately the board needs to make a decision. And I think your point is it's a serious enough decision that, it would make sense to have the whole board present. Morag makes a good point that to some degree it has to do with efficiency. Boards can do it both ways. I think you just got to make it and it's not an easy decision. Both it's right versus right, reasonable versus reasonable. Both those approaches make sense. It's just, what does the board feel comfortable with?
Other comments? Christina?
Is the concern that if it's only two, the parent retains the right or the student retain the right to appeal, and if we make it a majority, they do not? Is that accurate? Or do they always retain the?
They always retain the ability to appeal to the minister on, no, not anymore?
Not on all matters, but they can appeal as an expulsion.
Yeah.
They can appeal to the minister. And so that there's only 3 matters that can be appealed to the minister. One is expulsion. One is, I'm not sure exactly how it's worded, but the program to meet the needs, specialized needs of a student can be appealed. And the third is, teacher transfer. That's the third that can be appealed to the minister. Only 3 matters can be. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Just to the board. That's it.
Yeah.
Just those 2 matters. I thought there was one more.
Well, does a board of reference, can they appeal it to the minister?
No.
Okay.
That's a whole separate
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
So the parent on expulsion has the right to appeal it all the way up to the minister. Regardless of how we're in. I'm just thinking that if you have less than a majority, the minister might say, well, you didn't really do your job as a board because you didn't have a quorum to make that authority. So, I mean, I've gone through expulsions as a trustee, and I just feel more comfortable if it's just said the majority. If the board delegates the expulsion committee shall consist of a majority of trustees. Not the whole board. We don't have to have the whole board there, but the majority.
Okay, Mike, and then Christina, is that your hand up?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, it's somewhat theoretical, depends on what the parent wants to do. So theoretically, if you do a committee of 2, then there is a potential option of appealing to the entire board. A parent saying, no, I want to go to the board, then theoretically I could go to the minister. If you do the whole board, then there obviously is no opportunity. The next opportunity is the minister. So it probably doesn't make a difference one way or another, but it could theoretically add one more step. The parent could also say, I've already met with members of the board. I don't want to sit there and talk to the rest of you, so I'm going right to the minister. Yeah.
Christina?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, both of you. And in that case, I actually do prefer the 2. I think we should make every effort to retain students in school. I know that we do. And I think leaving avenues of appeal open is actually a better practice, in my opinion.
Other comments? Yeah. And I think if there isn't, knock on wood. I think if there isn't anything that our executive is advising us is in the act, and I think I agree to always leave that avenue of opportunity for appeal to the board would be more my preference, especially if there's nothing within the Education Act that states that we need to be doing it in a different way. Craig?
My question then is, if people are reading this, they don't realize they can appeal it to the board. So should we add that the committee can make a recommendation, which can be appealed to the board, and then the board makes a decision, and then it can be sent, and if the person wants, they can go to the minister? I mean, I'm just trying to clarify it so that if we're not going to have the majority of trustees making a decision, the parent knows that they've still got an option.
Okay, so sit with that question for a minute.
Yeah.
It's just after 5 o'clock. So just want to confirm that there is nobody for public forum. Seeing nobody. If you do end up seeing anybody, just let us know, and we'll go back to the question that Craig just posed. In our policy, it does state that they can appeal.
Number 8. They don't call it appeal, they call it review.
I
have to review on They don't call it an appeal to the minister anymore. They always call it a review by the minister. And that's in number 8 in the policy.
I think Craig's talking about an appeal by the board. because that's what Christina was referring to. That's okay. Jenny?
I would say that in general, people aren't aware of things like that. If I was, I would say in general, a parent would come to the committee, the decision would be made, and the parent would not be aware that they can then appeal that to the rest of the board. They would feel like those two trustees represented the board. And so I see Craig's perspective in this, that we are allowing then two people of the board to speak in a sense. By how it's actually received and perceived generally in public, the two members then represent the board as far as most people are concerned in their experience, right? And so I do see the argument for having quorum to make a decision like that. And so I would support that.
Christine?
I don't know the policy number. We have a student policy, thank you, that does talk about appeals, what is appealable in the process. And I am trustworthy that within the process that would be communicated to the student and or family. When I look at, I hear where you're coming from, Craig, but I also support just an appealable path. And the complexities that can come or the roadblocks that can come if you need quorum. We have a small community and we're all connected. So if we have an incident where a parent has engaged several or a few trustees that renders us unable to sit on a committee to deal with this issue. And then if you add that or take separately just different trustee time capacities to be able to serve, right? Some of us work full time outside of here or being out of town. And so I think if it's not mandated for us to do it, I would hesitate to move to 4. And I think if we keep it at 2, there is nothing stopping us, whether it's in procedures or not, but written officially, I should say, but there's nothing stopping us from communicating that there is still another step of communication.
Other comments? Craig?
Yeah, I'm just trying to read the policy on appeals. But if it has to be done within 10 days, and if they appeal to the board, it still has to be done in 10 days. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make a difference. And as our job of governance, sometimes it's messy, and we do have to get permission from our employee to attend a meeting. And I just know that when I was involved, it just made it so much easier when the board has 4 or 5, and I don't think we ever had 6, but we had 4 or 5, and you make a decision, then that's a solid decision by the board because it's the majority. And then you can communicate to the student what the results are. And I still feel more comfortable in that a majority of trustees, not the whole board, but a majority of trustees. That's for instance, we can't make a decision on governance with 3 trustees. We can't make a decision on policies with just 3 trustees to pass them. So why would we have an expulsion committee with just 2 trustees? I guess that's my concern. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll leave it to the board whether they would like to change that or leave it as it is.
So Andrea, did you have a comment or you're good to leave it? Okay, so I am not seeing support for that. So, yep, sounds good.
And then expulsion hearing shall be facilitated by the Associate Superintendent Instructional Services within 10 school days after the decision to move to expulsion. And we just changed that from suspension to expulsion. And when a student is expelled under this section, the board shall notify in writing the student's parent, guardian, or the student is determined an independent student. And then it's under the right to request a review under section 43 of the Education Act. And of course, all the references are just right there. And we probably, let's just see, yeah, we've already got 505.9 the appeals. So I would just say in comment, this is an important policy, notwithstanding that we might not have expelled any students lately. But if we take it out, we lose part of we could leave ourselves open for things. So I suggest that I would move that we accept policy 502.3 as amended.
And we have some questions. Christina?
Sorry, just under 8.2. Oh no, 8 sorry, just 8. Or the student, the language feels weird, sorry. When a student is expelled under the section, the board shall notify in writing the student's parents or guardian or the student if determined an independent student.
Yeah, I kind
Or
of,
is.
I think it should be if, not is. Well, no,
Sorry, it's just,
I'm
or
not
the
sure.
student, if the student is determined.
Or the student is determined. No, if the student is determined an independent student.
I think
Yeah.
it's just if, not is.
Yeah.
Or is
It's
determined
a
to be or
little-
something. Sure, yeah.
It might be a little messy language, yeah.
Yeah, is determined to be is fine, yeah. Sorry, just to.
Yep.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. If
So
the
we will
student
add that there. Thank you, Christina.
Is to be determined?
Is determined
Is to be determined an independent student. Okay.
Christine, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I know we've been talking about this for a while. I asked a question several minutes ago. I don't think I received an answer. The question I asked was, why is the definition of expulsion not included if the definition of suspension is in here? So if I were to read this, I have no idea what expulsion means. Does it mean I'm just kicked out of school? Does it mean, right? Like what are the parameters with which this sits? I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
It is and it isn't. I can sort of start off. I haven't read through it all in a long time, but there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what expulsion is. Expulsion, everybody thinks that expulsion means you're kicked out of school, never to come back, and banished to an island somewhere. That's not quite the truth of it. Expulsion is essentially any suspension that goes beyond 5 days. School, a principal can only suspend for 5 days. As soon as you go past 5 days, then it becomes an expulsion. So the result of an expulsion could be that no, you can't come back into the building, could be that you can't come back into the building for another week, could be that you come back to the building tomorrow, that sort of thing. So I don't know that it's probably, I don't know for sure, but it's probably not defined in the Education Act, and you probably wouldn't normally define it because it really is context and case specific. So really all an expulsion is once you've gone over 5 days of suspension, then that basically becomes an expulsion, and then it's more a matter of what exactly does the expulsion look like. Does that make sense?
I'll let Christine.
No, it does. So, sorry. I need to look with the context of what you just said. So then why isn't that specified more clearly? Right? Like why when we say a suspension shall be defined as a temporary prohibition instituted by principal or teacher under section for 5 school days or less, why not define expulsion as when a suspension extends the 5-day period or something? That's loose talking. Like, why would we not do that? Because that still allows it to be broad. It speaks to the assumption of what an expulsion is. Like, it's not necessarily you're out of school, right? Which is what some assume. yeah, for me, that would just give a better understanding of what expulsion is. So I guess I hear what you're saying, but why can't we have it in here?
And
Yeah,
yeah, certainly you could. I mean, Morag just pulled up Edmonton Public and they have some stuff defining. The other part of the challenge is you've got the 5 days of suspension, then there's this 10 days of expulsion to happen. So in between 5 and 10, there's sort of 15 days total that there's this gray area. What is between 5 and 10 while the board's making the decision? So yeah, theoretically it could be defined. I think you just want to be cautious about that because in my experience, expulsion hearings are really unique, really case by case. Yeah, that would be my only caution on it. But I don't think what you're saying is necessarily problematic. It just would need some thought put into
Craig.
it. Yeah.
I think 2.2 under expulsion, the board, if they decide to expel a student, and that would be from a school, the student has to be offered another educational program by the board. So an expulsion really isn't kicking them right out, or that person out of the division unless they choose to leave. It's saying you can't go back to that school, but here is the alternate program that you're going to go to finish your degree or finish your schooling. And then it's up to the parent and the student or the independent student. If they choose not to do that, then they have the right to leave the school division. Simple as that. But we do have to provide a program for them.
Yes.
So the expulsion is just from that particular school.
but it's not necessarily.
Christine, if you can turn your mic on, sorry.
but my understanding is not necessarily from that particular school. It's just an extension beyond the 5 days, right? So if it's
You could, I guess,
it's for 20 days, they can still stay in that school. That's where my understanding of Mike saying it's situational.
Yeah. Well, like the committee that we've chosen, the 2 trustees and a school administrator could sit down and listen and say, you know what? We think you can go back to your school with the following conditions. Or we don't think you can go back to your school and you need to go, we'll set up a program. So there is, yeah, that would solve that. It's up to that expulsion committee to say, yeah, you've spent your time. Now here's what you have to do in the school to go back to it.
Okay, Cheryl.
And actually, here's the definition more sense to me. This is Edmonton Public. This makes perfect sense and I think clarifies everything. Expulsion, the term used to describe an action by the Board of Trustees or its delegate, which we have a committee, in accordance with the Education Act, section, they have 37, I'm not sure if that's right, which for a period of more than 10 days denies the student access to one or more of the following: a course, school, riding a bus. It's simple. And that's expulsion, right? So it's longer than 10 days. Really what we're just saying is, and that just, because there's just so many complexities about how they get back, because as Craig suggests, you still have to offer them a program. It's not like you can deny them a program. You can't just say disappear. Like you have to, and that's why typically there's not a lot of expulsions, because you're having to work with the family and the student to provide something that's going to work.
Craig.
Based on that information from Edmonton Public, I would be conducive to adding that and then sending it back to the committee to let them talk about it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah,
And
I
even
feel,
for it to come back with all the edits.
yeah, all
and
the
then we
edits.
edit, there's been,
Yeah.
And
Get messy.
adding what Edmonton Public put into theirs, so that it would clear it up. And I just feel more confident that if we go back to the committee, then the committee can have a look at it.
Yep.
So I would suggest we do that. Do I have to make a motion to send it back to the committee? Okay, I move that we send 502.3 suspension and expulsion back to the policy committee for further review of the policy.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Those in favor? And that's carried. If you can just note that Jenny has stepped out of the meeting prior to that vote. Okay, and then Craig?
605.1, inclusive learning supports. And I think this one, the committee felt that it should end up eventually in procedure, right? Okay, so the changes that we looked at, the division, number 2 under regulations. Well, number 1, it's the same. We have to supports be provided such they're consistent with Alberta Ed regulations and guidelines. Number 2, support shall be made by division staff following consultation with the parents, guardian, teachers, the student where appropriate, and other members of the student's learning team. We just changed the word from district to division, and collaboration we deleted, I think. But in consultation is a better word, I think. 2.1, wherever possible, inclusive learning support shall be provided in the student's designated school. In some situations, a school may be required to receive programming of an alternative location and or through an alternative delivery structure.
Can I?
Stop me right there, yeah.
Okay. So into where the word is changed to consultation from collaborative decision-making as well as collaboration. I think that they're two very different pieces, and certainly would encourage some further discussion on that. But when I then went to look at what our actual policy is in our policies to see, and I have some confusion in regards to what we're actually looking at in regards to what was deleted when you actually compare this policy that's come with these edits forward to us. If you look at 6 and you compare it to what's actually in our current policy, it already has what we're being asked to add in the actual policy on our website. So I would actually like for this to go back to the committee and for it to actually show what the changes actually are, versus that this says to me that we're needing to approve something that's already there. So this is the 6 in red, Cheryl, that is being proposed for us to change. But when you look at 6 on our actual policy, it's already there. So I'm not sure, so I would rather, and I did see Trish on my way in today and asked her, and because she was actually away for that meeting, she wasn't exactly familiar with what was happening with this one. And then also when we look at the one that I have question or concern with, where we removed the collaborative decision making, and you look at what is actually currently in policy is actually different, and it actually already says consultation. So okay.
It was the date.
The date is actually 2019. Yeah. So I think that something isn't correct with what's come forward to the board. So I would actually appreciate if this can go back and have some further discussion, and whether I'm not saying it necessarily needs to go back to the committee, but it needs to go back to the department to be able to take a look at and bring us what is actually
what's happened is this edited version has ended up on the website.
It's already on there. Okay.
Yeah, but is because I know that this, I remember this for sure is newly edited. That I think has ended up on the website, and it's not been.
But all the changes.
But all the changes are
not all of them.
So yeah, we'll have. We need to take that one off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Get it consistent with what the committee reviewed, and then bring it back to the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be my request in this one, and I can certainly make that motion that it goes back to the chair of Policy Advisory Committee to work together with Trish and figure out next steps.
I think one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl, but part of this was because in the old procedure or policy, it stated we'd have to be on the hook for sending a kid, for instance, up to Edmonton to pay.
Oh,
for-
that was a different.
Oh, that was a different policy? Okay.
But I'm wondering what the difference is between the red and the purple on our, like, we need
Yeah.
some clarity.
Yes. just
Because I'm not
clarity.
sure if the red was already, if that was from a previous editing.
Yep.
In other words, is that red from being edited in 2019? See how 2019 is in red?
Yes. Yes.
And if the purple is what we just recently did. I have a feeling that that's it. I have a feeling the red is when she printed the edited version. I'm thinking the red was what was revised in 2019, and the purple is what was recently revised by the committee this past month, but we'll need some clarity on that. I think that's what it is.
I would.
So really what we should be doing is showing you this with only the purple.
Yeah.
Because what we're seeing is 2019 revisions and 2023 revisions.
Right. And Morag, you had your hand up.
I would just caution moving this to a procedure because if it hits appeals and goes to the minister, he will ask for your policy on inclusive ed distribution of resources. So this does and should likely remain as a policy.
Okay. Cheryl?
And I would agree with that, and because we haven't passed the previous policy, just to make the point at the committee meeting, I believe the what was talked about in terms of moving to a procedure was keeping the suspension expulsion high level and putting all of the details into a procedure.
Yeah.
Right, and
Right.
so I think that that long expulsion suspension policy really can be simply stated as a board policy is following the Education Act, so that we're making sure that it always has to follow the Education Act.
And I think.
And then the procedure would give all of those little details.
And I think
that
the
are
same thing with the inclusive learning.
and that could be the same with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would entertain a motion. Yeah.
Okay,
If you want to.
so I would make a motion that that policy 605.1 go back to the Policy Advisory Committee Chair and I don't know her role, her title, but to Trish as well to provide us with the exact picture coming forward. So those in favor? And that's carried. And I believe that we are moving on to our presentation. Are they here? Not yet? Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
We will move on to our next piece or,
207.1.
oh yeah, no, I'm moving on to the next policy. But I am just wondering it's been 3 hours since we've been
Should take a
sitting in
break.
our seats. Are we wanting to have a 5-minute break and then rejoin at 5:30?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay, so we'll rejoin at 5:30, and if our presenters are here, then we'll carry on do that, and if not, then we still have the one policy to come back to. And if you want to make sure you pull up that information, because you'll find out when they come. We have a special. next piece, and everybody should have their documentation in regards to the draft policy. And I will turn this part over to Craig.
We made this because the city of Lethbridge was thinking of doing a boundary, going to wards. My feeling is that we should just continue to have this. We'll pass it. We can pass it as a first pass and then think about it. But there's no telling what the city of Lethbridge might do. And there is some, I think there's some feedback out there. I've talked to some people that are upset that the city ignored the vote for ward system, which was a majority. And I think this could come back on the city. All we're doing with this is just saying we're prepared with this policy. If we go to a ward system, we have it. And it's better to be prepared than to try to change it like 5 months or 6 months before an election if the city changes their idea. So really, that's all it is. And we can do a first reading and pass it, and then we can just let it come back and talk about it some more. But it's fairly easy. We represent, lead, and serve the organizational owners, the cities of Lethbridge. And pursuant to the Education Act, we're authorized to establish ward boundaries for the purpose of trustee elections and in support of board structure to carry it out. There's a definition of a ward, there's regulations. We would align with the city of Lethbridge. There's communities of interest, all of those things which would make up a ward. And continuous wards. Basically, I think we should just pass for the first reading, pass it. Let's think about it and maybe get it as a policy so that we are prepared down the road. If the city of Lethbridge changes their idea on the ward system, we already have it ready to go. And so it doesn't change anything. If the city of Lethbridge doesn't have a ward system, then in the election, we would have, just like the last election, everybody elected at large. But if the city does change it, we're prepared. So that's my only comment.
And my only caution is that it's not if the city changes it, we'll be prepared. If at any point, if the next board or if this board decided that we wanted to go to a ward system, I think that it needs to be very clear that it is, if a decision is made by this board or by influence of the city, that this is the policy that we would follow versus if the city makes a change. So that would be, if I'm going to send it back, personally, that is the piece that I would want the Policy Advisory Committee to be looking at with those eyes, that it's if there was a board that wished to make that change or if there was other influence in any way. So it would be very generic, and that would be what I would want to see happen.
And I appreciate that, and that's true. The board, we as a board can change and decide to go to a ward system even if the city doesn't.
Yes. It's
a little more money, but we can do that. And other areas do have wards. So I would agree with Allison that all it is the first reading, then it'll go back to the committee. Allison can give her input there, and then we'll go up from there. So it's just basically, do we accept the basic premise of having a policy that would talk about Lethbridge School Division ward boundary review?
Okay. So any comments, Andrea? And then Jenny.
I agree with you that it should be worded, should a board decide, not when the city decides, just because they might not want to.
Yeah.
And they don't have to follow suit.
Nope,
right?
we do not. Any board
Okay.
does not have to follow suit, and any board can make the decision even if the city is not making a decision. Regardless, the money piece comes after. It's about what your principle is of how you choose as a division to run. So, Jenny?
It seems to me that the preliminary step to doing this would have been to have a more extensive conversation about our approach to whether or not we want a ward system or not, before we start taking actionable steps toward preparing for it. And so for myself, I haven't explored that. I don't feel like we've explored that well enough for us to be putting resources and time and energy into this unless it's something that it's not being currently pursued by the city. And I know that that's controversial, but as it stands, that's what it is. And so unless this is something that we are looking at seriously doing, then I'm not sure that it's necessary for us to be preparing just in case policies. And so I'm open to that conversation for sure about award system. I also understand that regardless of what the city does, we always have that option. And so if that's a conversation that we would like to hold, then I would really welcome that conversation. As far as creating policy, without that conversation, I'm not comfortable moving forward with a policy.
Craig?
I think we could draw a parallel to the anti-racism and anti-oppression policy that came before the board in May and June. You have 3 steps. It has to be passed 3 times by the board. And we know that at each of the first 2, there wasn't a unanimous appeal. So then it goes back and there's discussion. And all this is doing is saying, this is the first reading. We'll send it to the policy committee. They're going to go through it and make some, see what it is, go out to their stakeholders, bring it back to us. And then before the second reading, we will have an in-depth discussion about ward boundaries. And so it's not taking away anything from the board. It's just saying, here's the process, similar to when we did the anti-racism and anti-oppression. And remember that after the first reading, we sent it back to change some things in it. And after the second reading, we took the summer to think about it. And then on the third reading, it was passed. So it's not rushing it's not going to rush anything. It's just saying, this is a policy that we should look at, whether we want to do it or the city does it. That's, as you said, it's immaterial. But as Allison pointed out, it's up to us. And it's just getting the process started and getting feedback from our constituents, the 2 QP, administrators, teachers, and the public. And then we can start to discuss it in depth.
Christine and then Jenny.
I'm in agreement with Allison in that I don't want to be aligned necessarily with the city. I think that's a good point, and I agree with that. I'm actually cautious when our board dialogue is we need to be mindful of our policies, be cutting back and streamlining. I'm cautious of creating a policy when we're not, what I believe is not ready to create this policy. One thing I would value, I would what I would like to see, rather than putting this forward and then starting the work, if this is something that the board decides that they want to pursue, I would rather have community engagement first, see if this is of interest of the community, and then move forward with process, because we can do this. And so I would rather have that engagement piece first.
Jenny?
I appreciate that and agree with that. My concern in response to your comment, Craig, with starting, and I understand the process for a policy going through several readings, but my concern is for us to be putting forth something, starting that process without intention behind it communicates an intention. So unless we mean it, I don't want to create confusion or questions. I don't want people to get the wrong idea, and I don't want to take time and resources from all the avenues that we draw from to create policy in a proper way, unless there's going to be follow through with that, and reliability for the community in viewing our actions as a board.
Craig?
Then one possible suggestion is that we could take this policy 207.1 and discuss it in depth at a committee of the whole, first of all. And then we could talk to our school councils. And then, but we also remember we have a citizen, a parent on our policy committee that takes it to the divisional school council. So I have no problem in saying, let's discuss this at a committee of the whole. Let's fine tune it maybe and decide as a board at that time whether we want to pursue it or not. So I'm open to that. I do think it needs to be discussed because we are getting to be a bigger city and we're not getting any smaller. So that's how I look at it. And if the board is in favor of that, I think that's a good topic to discuss at a committee of the whole.
And I think it'd be great for us to take it to a committee of the whole. And also, if you guys remember in December when I talked about how the city is going to a new method, I forget exactly what the terminology is, but looking at the areas of the city, and that I had mentioned that it might be a discussion for us to have in regards to if we look at those feeder schools and us looking at our representation differently. So I would like to make a motion that this go to a future committee of the whole. I do not see urgency in this, but my motion would be that this goes to a committee of the whole, and that is the motion. And then while we do that conversation as a board, that we also look at our school representation piece as trustees. So we have it kind of as a full discussion. So the motion is very simple, that this be moved to a committee of the whole. And any further discussion? Those in favor? And that's carried. Okay. So with that, I would like to, perfect. We're very happy that we're done policy now. I would like to call in our special guest. Mike, if you want to go and get them. They're coming in. Come on in. Sorry, we had a couple things just to finish up there, but. Thank you for letting us hijack. Yes, if you guys would like to come and join us at the front over this way.
Do they want to be in front of the sign, maybe?
Oh, perfect, for sure. For sure. We just don't have, can we, Jenny, does your mic work? Perfect. So we do, because we do have, this is public at this point, and we have a live audience. So you do have to speak kind of close into it. So she'll, okay. So tonight we have a special award that Shannon has asked to come to our meeting to present to one of our trustees. So.
Thank you so much, Allison, and thanks to all of the Board of Lethbridge District 51 for the opportunity to interrupt your board meeting. Of course, I'm joining you here on Blackfoot territory this evening for an investiture for the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal. This is to pay tribute to someone in our community who has given of their time and talents and service to Lethbridge, to the province of Alberta, and to our great country. As many of you may know, Alberta's Platinum Jubilee Medal commemorates the 70th anniversary of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's accession to the throne as Queen of Canada. Her late Majesty dedicated more than 70 remarkable years of continuous service to Canada, the United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth. Now, Her late Majesty expressed her wish that Jubilee events be an occasion for enjoying a sense of togetherness, which we are doing, I hear, doing the people's business at the Public School Board, and for all those joining online, and to enjoy a sense of optimism about the future, which makes our recipient, I think, doubly more meaningful, as her tremendous achievements have really been in service to the kind of future that we're all building together. I would invite our friend and our colleague and the fabulous Christina Larkin to come forward to receive her Queen's Jubilee Platinum Medal. It is in recognition of her community work, her volunteerism, through her every interaction in this city for a decade, She, of course, as we know, works for the YMCA of Lethbridge. She has contributed to dozens of organizations, and including as an elected trustee of Lethbridge School District 51. In particular, this Queen's Jubilee recognition is for her work working in mutual aid. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Christina worked very, very closely with the COVID-19 support circle, which brought assistance to thousands of people in the time that they needed it the most, when there was so much uncertainty for so many people, when vulnerable people really felt like the world in many ways was conspiring against them. Christina Larkin was there to help in whatever way needed to be done, to connect people to others who could help without any formal organization, without any kind of rules around it, just people helping people. And Christina set that up and she kept it going. And I know, because I've heard from people, that it had a profound effect on many people's lives and made sure that many more families and kids and ordinary people got through that difficult time of uncertainty. So I'm very, very grateful for that work that Christina did, and for all that I know she will continue to do, because she's not off the hook yet. We will make sure that she continues to contribute to this community. And but for this outstanding service and citizenship so far, I am awarding Christina Larkin the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal. Our certificate from Lieutenant Governor, and in the envelope we have 3 pages of when you can wear this and under what circumstances and how and what kind of lapel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
To interrupt you.
This is always a great, yes, this is a great interruption. So. Don't forget your rule book. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Huge congratulations, Christina. Definitely well deserved. Yes, speech.
Not speech. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to do it here. I did reach out to Cheryl and to Allison just for the opportunity I thought about. I was asked to think of a place where we could do this, where I was surrounded by my peers, and where it might be meaningful for me. And being a trustee is truly like the honor of a lifetime to support my community in this way. And I believe that this role for all of us represents the trust that our community has in each of us. And so it's an honor I carry all the time. It's a privilege, and I just really appreciate it. And so thank you for the opportunity to interrupt. I know we have more on the agenda, so thank you very much.
Congratulations. Now we got to get back to meeting. Okay, so let's look at where we are. Okay, so looks like we are on division highlights. Perfect. So Christine looks like she's jumping to go first. You're good? And reminder just that these are highlights, so just a couple of quick things from one thing. Perfect, go ahead.
I just want to say cheers to Wilson Middle School for their performance of Peter Pan. It's on this month because I was able to take it in after our December board meeting, and their students did a phenomenal job, both the orchestra behind the scenes and on the stage. And so I just want to say thank you to that whole.
Maybe you've talked too much, like. Okay, Andrea, are you ready? Go ahead.
So the last week of December, I was lucky to visit classrooms at Lakeview and Lethbridge Christian and take them some Christmas erasers and bond with the kids. So that was exciting. And I look forward to reading at Literacy Days at Lethbridge Christian and ICES coming up. And I was at Lethbridge Christian last night, and their principal said regarding town hall that I think 6th grade 8ers were just like, we want to go to town hall. So that's really exciting. They were excited about that.
Excellent. Christine, are you ready?
I think one of the things that's been most special to me is being part of school councils. I'm not a parent, and so I don't actually ever attend school councils. So this has been a new experience for me. So I just wanted to shout out the school councils and the parents and the staff that work in collaboration through community to make sure that students have what they need and that schools are really representative of each of our different, community groups that are represented in a school. Students, staff, parents, community agencies, and school councils have been a really special place to learn about that. So just a couple shout outs. It's been like wish list season for school council spending. And so it's been really great to see the collaboration between the monies raised at schools and where it's going and how that gets decided. So lots of great suggestions from all parties about where it's going. Some great ideas like literacy kits, because there's been such a investment from numeracy, and so that's been appreciated. And so now trying to focus on literacy, and so just been great to see.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Go ahead, Jenny.
I just wanted to highlight the hard work of our students in our division, especially during this week of exams for our older kids in the high schools and in grade 9 as kids are doing their PATs and doing their diploma exams and all the work that they've put into the semester and the work they're putting into these exams, and then also our schools and the way they facilitate those exams and the efforts and organization that go into providing the needs for each student in being able to write those exams in the best circumstance individual to them. And I know that is a lot of work and a lot of organizing. And so I just wanted to highlight the type of work being done this month in our high schools. And I am a liaison for 2 high schools, so they kind of show up a little more in my mind. So but we just appreciate all of our students, and we see them all working hard and just that love for learning and that opportunity to put forth what they've learned and to see that assessment for themselves. So
thanks, Craig.
I'd like to thank both Galbraith and Westminster. Unfortunately, I've been online with them for the last couple of meetings, but their enthusiasm by the teachers towards the students and trying to create opportunities for every student to try something new is wonderful. I'm trying to get to as many basketball games as possible, and I've been able to see Senator Joyce Fairburn and Chinook. And although the scores sometimes aren't in favor of our home schools, it's fun to watch the kids play and watch and have parents out. And I just like to take this opportunity to thank the Lethbridge School Division, the parents, the administration, the students. I've been down in the States for 4 weeks and then a couple of weeks, and I'll guarantee you that no matter who's in charge of our government in Alberta, we have one of the best educational systems in the world. And we can debate all sorts of things, but after being down there and reading reports and everything, we have to be thankful that we have dedicated staff, dedicated administration, and a dedicated board and parents that want to see the best for their kids. And I would just like to send that thank you out to everyone connected to the Lethbridge School District Division, because it's worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. And for my division highlights, it's similar to some of the other ones that we've heard. I did get to wrap up the final week in December by still going to some of our school activities and events. And over at Dr. Proby, it was amazing to be able to be there and involved with the goats they brought in and the sugar that they, the syrup that they turned in. Froze on the Kona ice that was donated by Kona, and just the interaction. And it was interesting going into some of the grade 5 classrooms, and they were like, "Who are you?" Because I went around to see what was going on in all the classrooms, and it was great to be able to talk about the board and what we do as trustees. So it was good to have those conversations, and just the interactions with the students was just fabulous. So amazing the activities that are going on. And then as we enter January, and there are still so many performances and things that are coming up with the dance presentation performance coming up here at LCI. So just lots of great, amazing students and staff within our division that I'd like to shout out as they are doing their exams, PATs, diplomas. It's a busy time. So with that, we will move on to the board chair report and community conversations. So this is the time, Craig, when you were like, what was on there? So we have one coming up right away. Go ahead, Christina.
I actually found out at break that due to illness, the facility is closed. So we will not be able to host it.
Okay, so
Sorry.
it's going to be canceled.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's okay. So we are canceling, and we will make
Sorry,
sure
we
that
just
that-
found out at break. I apologize.
Nope, that's fair. Good timing. So we will make sure that that information gets out. It was, so it was for this Thursday, and certainly a huge thank you to the BGC Youth Center for always being willing to help us and host for us. So we do appreciate that and hope that they do get recover very soon. Okay. And with that, our next one is going to be on February 14th. And we had a number of requests for doing a virtual opportunity with some of our ones last year where they got switched to virtual. It was a request that we look at doing some in the future. So we are doing that one over the lunch hour, so that 11:30 to 1. And I know that some people that are might be at work, that work a regular work day, might be able to join on and go on Teams for that. So Garrett will be able to provide us with the link, and that will be available on our website. And then appreciation to Christine for setting up our March one, which is on March 7th at the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association from 1:30 to 3 there in the afternoon. And again, that's a great facility that if you do have kids, you can certainly bring your students along with you as well. So any other, pardon me? It's 6 o'clock. We need a motion to carry on. So Christine is making that motion that we go past 6 o'clock. And those in favor? And that's carried. So with that, as we go through, we just have a couple of more items, and then we do need to go into camera. So we'll just carry on with those last few items. So next is our wellness committee, and Andrea. And just if there's anything to add to your report or any questions for her.
Sure. You bet. So we're excited about the digital wellness program and excited that there are fabulous candidates. Really appreciated that Mike and Rhonda got together with staff on the Collaborative Community Day for their wellness initiative and got such wonderful and honest feedback, and they'll be meeting with them again. And the division wellness challenges are noted there. And I do, as part of this committee, meet with Healthy Lethbridge. And so I meet with them tomorrow. And we just talked about rolling out all their initiatives to everyone who's on the committee so that they can roll them out as well. And the very next day after that, I also meet with the Old Man River Health Advisory Council meeting. And there are 17 more family doctors coming to Lethbridge. 4 have already started. And in asking about for parents who are unattached to clinics, they said, please watch the Chinook Primary Care Network website for upcoming names of doctors as they arrive and start to look for patients. And I'll get to meet with Dr. Erin Lowe about the possibility of having doctors come to schools to talk, and Morag and I will talk more about that. And then the terms of reference are there. And when this last came to you, I was not able to come to the meeting. And so if you could see in the red where we've added school health and wellness and key duties and responsibilities, may I move that we adopt those amendments? And we already had added the 2 trustees. So, make the amendment. Yeah, I mean the motion. I move that the amendments to the terms of reference of the Wellness Committee be adopted by the board.
Okay. And everybody has a copy of the terms of reference there. Okay, sounds good. Christina.
Sorry, just a process question. I don't know that much about the changes, so not necessarily about that, but just do we typically bring forward committee TOR for review? Yeah.
Yeah, so it hadn't been done yet.
Oh, okay. We had just missed it, so we just have to do it now.
Yeah, it wasn't missed. It was just that they hadn't been able to work on it as a committee. So this is the first time it's coming forward.
Okay.
That makes sense? Okay. Okay. So those minor changes are in there. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? And that's carried. And now she did go through the report. So are there any questions on the report or on the work the committee's doing? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Our next committee report is Division School Council, and Jenny.
Thank you. So with Division School Council, unfortunately, the way my schedule lines up, I don't often get to come to most of the presentations. So I only got to catch the last few minutes of this one, but I got to catch the conversation at the end and recognized how valuable the presentation was. And the presentation was centered around accessing interpreters and overcoming barriers to communication within the division, and the resources that are available and the efforts that are made to have equal opportunity and accessibility for people, and the initiatives that we try to collaborate with community and within our division to make those things happen. And there was, it seemed to be very good conversation around that and a lot of engagement on that topic. Cheryl was away, so we got the pleasure of having Morag with us. So as a division, I had the opportunity to give the trustee report and reviewed with Division School Council the upcoming community conversations, as well as the upcoming town hall. We discussed the format and the value of the feedback and the way that that is incorporated into what we do as a board and what we do as a division. We also were able to review and look at the calendar had been approved and the process that that's done by. Our ASCA annual general meeting was discussed, and the election information for that was shared, as well as timeline for resolutions. There's been a little bit of conversation in accessing the ASCA resources in our schools more fully. There's been a little bit of conversation about setting up school-based emails for each of those school councils to have an email that is passed down for that council. And so those council members at Division School Council are in conversation with Garrett in setting that up, and that I think will be an effective initiative in spreading those resources and sharing that password so that those resources can be well used and useful for student councils. And then out of our committee reports, we had a little bit of discussion about healthy changes within our cafeterias and digital wellness, as well as the initiatives to track AHS, helping us to track absenteeism and wellness, physical wellness as well in our schools. And we heard from our community engagement committee as well about our upcoming ICE scholarship and the communication survey, as well as that town hall reminder. So it was a effective meeting. Any questions?
Any questions for Jenny? Just a reminder that any trustee can attend the DSC meeting, and it is available both virtually as well as in person. And I know that Tyler did join this last one as well, so appreciate that. And next is Policy Advisory Committee. Craig, I know this is just a highlight of the perfect. We can't hear you without your mic on.
I've got nothing to add because we had a good debate, and this is what we're doing. And so recommend that this board receive this report as information.
Perfect. Now, just making sure, I know at DSC they had spoken in regards to parents being able to, that they've received them. So do you know if these ones have gone out? Because with the due date of February 8th, it's kind of a quick turnaround for our school councils.
Yeah, it was first reviewed, well, suspension and expulsion, we're going to take it back to the committee. And then, so it'll go back out to the public, to all of our stakeholders after that, after February. This one, 605.1.
I'm just referring to the ones that say February 8th. So
February 8th?
Yeah, so all the ones that have feedback.
We haven't reviewed them, so when we review them, it will go out to the public. It'll go out to all of our stakeholders after the 8th. We haven't even looked at those.
Okay.
So the bottom group is
I see student activities, 503.5, policy to stakeholders for feedback, due February 8th, same with.
Yeah, and I think that was reviewed before. Cheryl maybe answers that.
Here, I stole yours. Oh.
What I can do, because it's not necessarily that clear by the notes, is I'll sit with Kristen and Kelsey tomorrow, because we need to make sure. Oh, did she just send it? Okay, did we get it out to parents yet? Okay, so that'll go, and can I double check that, make sure we got the right ones tomorrow morning, and then we'll make sure they're out to parents.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you. Okay, so any questions for Craig? Seeing none, we're good. So now we do need to move back into camera. So Christine is moving us back into camera, and those in favor, and that's carried. So we can close.